Welcome to another episode of Submission Radio. It's March 15th. I'm Dennis Shkaratov. I'm here with Kasper Rosalowski. We are back, baby. We took a bit of a hiatus there, Cass, and I don't think anybody misses their listeners more than Submission Radio.
No, we missed you guys heaps, and we did drop a little exclusive for you guys. There was a glimpse of the return of Submission Radio. It was, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, we did manage to interview Mark Coleman. He's very, very gracious. In case you guys haven't heard, Mark Coleman, fallen on a bit of hard times. He's not doing that well at the moment, so we interviewed the Hammer. This is a great little interview for you guys, but this is the official return. This is us back in the usual format. 3 guests and a big discussion. We're going to be talking about UFC 185, plenty of stuff to talk about. And of course, this week's guests are Julianna Pena, the Venezuelan vixen Thiago Silva, and we're going to be speaking to Ronda Rousey's mom, AnnMaria DeMars. She is, well, I can't wait to see what she has to say. There's a lot of things to talk about, like Judo and Cris Cyborg and things like that. We've got an absolutely packed show, don't we, Dennis?
We sure do, Cass. And for a lot of people who don't know who Ronda Rousey's mum is, she's not just Ronda Rousey's mum. This woman is just an absolutely amazing person. She's accomplished so many crazy things in the world of judo and also just in the world in general. In judo, she's absolutely one of the best female judo players that's ever been in the history of judo. She won the world championships in 1984. That was back in the day when she was the first U.S. athlete or first U.S. judoka to do so. I mean, she has accomplished some amazing, amazing things, including having a PhD in educational psychology, amongst other things. Now she designs games, educational games. So if you just think she's Ronda Rousey's mom, you're sorely mistaken. This lady herself has accomplished a lot when it comes to combat sports.
Yeah, I hear that she used to jump on Ronda Rousey when Ronda was sleeping and wake her up with an armbar and then yell, "Always be ready." So I want to ask her about that and see if the rumors, the word on the street, the Submission Radio scouts, if they've got it right, and see if it's true. Just another quick thing. We've been speaking to our fans. We're going to talk about this a little bit later on. But a few of the fans mentioned that we say absolutely a lot, and some of them actually turned it into a drinking game, so they do a shot every time they hear us say absolutely. Well, I just want to say that that's absolutely fantastic, and we absolutely appreciate it, fans. We absolutely love hearing fans, give us this kind of feedback. It's going to be an absolutely great show with absolutely lots of guests.
Absolutely, Cass. And also, guys, later on in the show, me and Cass will be breaking it down. We'll be breaking down the big show. Welcome to the show, UFC 185. There's a lot to talk about there, Cass, and I know you have a lot of thoughts that you want to get out there about a lot of the matchups. Also, I was lucky enough to check out the first ever cage fighting here in Victoria. For people that don't know, this is a huge monumental event for all the fans here in Victoria and the fight fans in Australia. It was the first time that we had an event down here that was actually held in a cage, an octagon, or whatever you want to call it. It was Hex Fighting. It was their second event. I went down there in person to check it out. It was a fantastic experience, and you and me will be having a bit of a chat about it later on in the show as well, Cass.
Yeah, I can't wait. There's absolutely tons and tons of stuff to talk about. I feel like we're going to give people alcohol poisoning by the end of the show.
Yeah, that's it. Or absolute poisoning if you don't drink. Hey, if you don't drink alcohol, maybe, who knows, start eating a chocolate bar, and by the end of the show, you won't be able to make the heavyweight division in the UFC. Also, guys, just a quick shout out to all the fans out there. If you get an opportunity, jump on Twitter and check us out at Submission AUS. We have a lot of great stuff on Twitter, always putting up our opinions, always weighing in on what's happening in the world of MMA, and there's a lot of funny memes and images and all sorts of old content that we love to put up there, so make sure you follow us. And also, Kasper mentioned the Mark Coleman interview. It was an absolute pleasure chatting to Mark. It got quite emotional near the end there, but it was certainly one of our favorite moments that we've had on the show. Check it out. It's on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Submission Radio AU. And now, guys, without further ado, we've got a lot of guests, like Kasper mentioned. We've got our first one on the line, so let's get to it.
All right, guys, our next guest is a UFC bantamweight fighter. She is the winner of the Ultimate Fighter Season 18. She'll be facing Milana Dudieva on April 4th at UFC Fight Night 63. She's none other than the Venezuelan vixen. Julianna Pena, welcome to Submission Radio. How are you?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Really good, really good. It's our pleasure to be chatting to you. Now, we want to take a look back at your career and some of the things that have happened. While you've always had a presence at UFC events for the last year, the last time you fought was in 2013, becoming the first female Ultimate Fighter. This is obviously due to getting a serious knee injury whilst training. How is that knee feeling now?
My knee feels great. It feels better, faster, stronger than ever, and that's how it feels. It feels great. I feel like I never had any injury.
Yeah, if it sounds like the $1 million knee, the way you described it, Juliana. So it definitely sounds pretty good. Now, before we discuss your training and upcoming fight, we want to go back a little bit in time. Let's jump in a time machine. Let's go back in time. People may not know this, especially the ones listening in New Zealand and Australia, but you've had lots of adversity in your career. I want to go back to 2012. Many fans may not know that you actually lost a fight to Samurais. And however, 2 months before that fight, you were hit by a drink driver walking down the street. Just wondering, going back to 2012, how difficult was that period for you?
It was really difficult. I think at the time I was going to fight Lauren Murphy in Alaska, and I was asked to be the designated driver for my girlfriend. And my mom, she told me that she just didn't want me to go out. She kept telling me, don't go out. Stay in with me. And I said, Mom, I already promised them that I would be the designated driver. And so I went up against her better judgment, and let that be a lesson to you kids to obey your parents. And I ended up getting hit 5 days before the fight. And I was walking on the sidewalk, and I got hit by a drunk driver. And it was really devastating. I still have a pretty big scar across my nose, and I took the fight on short notice because the main event had fell out for a local show. I fought up a weight class, and I have the excuse until the cows come home. The day before the fight, I stabbed myself in the wrist on accident doing dishes with a sharp pie cutter, and I had to get 6 stitches in my wrist. And it was just, I think at that time, because I had fought Canadians previously and had, got finishes over them, that I just wasn't taking it as seriously as I should have. I was running around cornering every single fighter up until my fight, and I was the main event, and I just was too tense and not in the right state of mind, and I took my first loss. And after that, I wanted to quit, and I wanted to be done with the sport. And my coach refused, and I took another short notice fight. I had to cut 23 pounds in 9 days, and I fought Deanna Bennett down in Salt Lake City, and I took another loss. And those 2 losses were very hard on me. At that time, I for sure was like, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. And then, I always knew in the back of my mind, because my coach was always saying, Dana's going to change his mind. He's going to allow women in the UFC one day. And to me, it was a pipe dream. I just was like, yeah, right. It's never going to happen. He's not going to do it. But I kept training. And then one day they said that, yes, they were going to allow women, and that there was going to be an Ultimate Fighter tryouts. And I knew that was my opportunity to jump on that and to excel my career. And so I'm really happy that I didn't quit and that I stuck with it.
Yeah, it's crazy. It seems like battling adversity has been a theme for your career. Although the thing that I took from that story is, if you're going to fight, no more baking pies. Just stick to like takeout or something without pie cutters. When you found out that you were going to be trying out for the Ultimate Fighter, with those 2 losses sort of fresh in your mind, how did you feel going into those tryouts? Were you confident, or and in general, obviously being the first female Ultimate Fighter, or like the season for the Ultimate Fighter for females, how did that feel for you?
To be honest, I wasn't confident at all. I was terrified out of my mind. I didn't know if I could win again. I didn't know if it was just all a fluke, all my other wins before. I didn't know if I even knew how to fight. And when I went down there, they kept calling my name through the rounds, and every round they would call my name. And every time they would call my name, I would break down in a melting pot and just start crying like, I can't believe they just called my name, And so I wasn't as confident as I guess I would like. The winning of the first fight to get in the house refreshed my mind that I am an animal, and that I am very dangerous, and that I do know how to fight. And so it was just good to finally get that win again, and to remember what it was like to win.
Now, in the Tough House, you had some very impressive performances. However, around the house, it looked like the girls didn't really embrace you. Just wondering, was that a difficult experience for you, the whole tough situation with the girls not really embracing you in the house?
It was, and I had a couple of Ultimate Fighters, boys that train here locally, that have kind of gave me the rundown of how it was in the house. They told me, stick to yourself, sleep longer, eat better, train harder, get a room upstairs, they gave me some tips and advice of what I should have been doing in the house, and I knew that not everyone was going to like me and accept me. And of course, I thought in my mind, I don't care if they do or if they don't, because this is not the show to be braiding people's hair. This is the show to be beating people up. And you look to the left, and that girl wants to knock your head off. You look to the right, that girl wants to knock your head off, So it's not exactly a place where, we're BFFs and have been best friends forever. It's kind of a war zone. And, the person that sticks to their path more is the one that's going to win. And so when I was not embraced, I didn't even think anything of it. And I, in fact, enjoyed that, because not only did it give me more motivation to train harder, but I think it would have been a distraction if I would have been embraced more by all of the other women.
I think that's a really good point. And, going back to that tough experience, you were a year removed from your first fight with Sarah, and now you're in the semifinals. Sometimes life just works out in crazy ways. What did you think of the about the matchup and how it played out against Sarah, especially after losing to her previously?
The one thing that I would say is that I was very happy that she was going to be in the house. I did not know that we were going to fight each other up until Dana called out the matchup, and that was very shocking because I wasn't expecting that. But one thing is that I think mentally I had her ticket the moment I saw that she was at the tryouts. And I was very much eyeing to get a chance at redemption just because of the circumstances in the first fight. And I felt like I should have never lost that first fight. And it was a very good lesson for me to learn that first fight. I definitely learned to never underestimate your opponent like I did her the first time. And I just wanted a chance. I was frothing at the mouth to get another opportunity to fight her again. And so I was very happy that they called the matchup, because I felt, like I said, that I had her ticket and that I was going to get some redemption for myself, because that was a loss that I never wanted to be on my record in the first place.
Yeah, it's crazy how life works sometimes, and it's crazy how things play out sometimes. Now, obviously, you went on and you became the first female Ultimate Fighter. I mean, me and Casper, I don't think we'll be going into the Tough House anytime soon, unless they have a delicious cheese buffet or a wine and cheese night. Take us into that moment. Tell us, what was it like? You're standing in the octagon. Dana White is congratulating you. You've gone through this crazy experience where a year ago, you got hit by a car, you lost a few fights in a row. Now you're the first ever Ultimate Fighter female. I mean, you go from one extreme to another to such a high in your life. Take us into that moment. What did you feel like?
I think a lot of people have said before that it felt like surreal and it felt like a dream, and everything's going so fast yet so slow. And I feel like in so many different aspects in my life, I've been fighting my whole life just to get acceptance and respect, and just to prove to people, that I am a tough and worthy opponent, and that I'm one of the toughest, and if not the toughest. So I think that in that moment, I thought, hey, I finally got a little bit of respect. I finally got, some admiration for the work that I've been putting in. I'm finally being recognized for all of the hard work and dedication that I've been putting in since I started, and it felt amazing. But at the same flip side of the coin, I'm thinking, this is just the beginning. This is just the starting point, and there's so much more to go. And so I enjoyed it, but I also thought, this is just the beginning, because this is just the start of my career.
And essentially it was. And we mentioned before about you going through a lot of diversity, and obviously there was more to come. You suffered a very serious injury in training, damaging, among other aspects, your ACL, your MCL, your LCL, and meniscus, which took you out indefinitely for 2014. I mean, reading on paper, we're amazed that the leg is still attached. How difficult was that period for you, especially watching other girls climb the ranks and obviously making names for themselves?
It was very difficult. It was a process that lets you know many things about yourself. Are you able to come back from something like that? Are you strong enough mentally and physically to come back from something like that? Do you still want it? Is it as important to you as, never being able to, walk again when you're 50 or something like that? Is this going to cause damage to me in the future and stuff like that? So a lot of things play into your mind, and it kind of puts puts you in a dark spot, and you kind of find out who your real friends are in that same sense. But, you know, especially with having those losses and continuing to fight and just having all the obstacles and difficulties that I've had throughout my life before fighting ever came, I believe that I'm not a quitter, and I've never been a quitter, and quitting is not in the Pena state of mind. And it just solidified the fact that I can do this, and I am going to do this, and of course I still want it, and of course I still want to gain everybody's respect back, and for them to see me as a champion one day.
Absolutely right, Julianna. I mean, the story so far in your career is good enough to put a movie together already, so I'm excited what's going to happen in the future. And you're back in the Octagon April 4th, just a few weeks away now. You know, how's training camp going for Milana? She's a tough opponent.
She is a super tough opponent, one that I respect and admire greatly. Like I said, I never underestimate opponents. And, you know, I in one sense that you could say that I love her, but I want it, and I want to win, and I want to win more than her. And as much as I love her in spirit, I'm going to do everything in my power to make it very difficult for her. And it's going to be a tough, gritty fight, you know, but it's one that I'm expecting, and it's one that I'm embracing, and I just can't wait to go and get another win, and to refresh everybody's memories that I haven't died, and that I'm still around, and that I'm still here, and more importantly, I want to win for myself and for my team, and to get kind of a win back for the fact that my training partner fought her in August in Macau and took a loss from her that I feel like she shouldn't have took a loss on. And it was a bad decision in my opinion, and I just want to go and get that win for my teammate, and to be the big sister in this type of situation, and to get that win for my city.
Yeah, and you know, people love a good story going into a fight. Just stylistically, where do you think you hold the advantages over Milana?
I feel like I hold advantages everywhere you put me, on the feet, on the ground. I feel like I'm a more well-rounded fighter, and that I have more tools in my bag to be able to finish her. And so where I hold the advantage is all around, and there's only one way to find out, and that's on April 4th on Fox Sports 1 or in Fairfax, Virginia at the Patriot Center, where you guys can check out the fight and see for yourself.
Wow, that just gets me excited for the fight. Now, Julianna, we know you're in a rush, so we have a couple of really quick fan questions we want to ask you. Let the fans know you're coming on the show, and as you know, you got a lot of fans out there.
No problem.
They have a bunch of questions, so we chose a couple. First one comes from Darren MMA Jones. I mean, I guess this is a question that you'd hear quite a lot. You know, what did you think of Ronda Rousey's performance at UFC 184? And let's say in a matchup with her, what do you believe you could have an advantage over her? How would you approach the Ronda Rousey puzzle one day? Let's say if you do get a couple of wins this year and get that title shot.
Well, first off, let me be the first to tell you that I am the biggest Ronda Rousey fan that there is, and I think that she's an incredible athlete. I think that she had an impressive win yet again, and I also think that where I would hold the advantage is that I would not be mentally broken before the fight ever started, which I feel is sometimes, to me, in my opinion, what seems to be the case with these other women that are facing her. They already look dead upon arrival when they're in the cage with her, and I refuse to be shaken. I've been bullied my whole life, and I just feel like she's been a bully, and I feel like in the sense that I'm the bully, and that I'm a bigger bully than she can imagine. And I think that I would also have the advantage in the sense that I'm not afraid wherever the fight goes. I feel like I have great scrambles, great wrestling, great jiu-jitsu. I have great striking, great Muay Thai. Wherever the fight goes, and this goes for any opponent that I ever face in the future, wherever the fight goes with any opponent that I face, I'm comfortable. And I am confident in my skill set. And I'm going to give them hell or die trying no matter who I fight.
Julianna, just a quick question from the real McCoy, another fan. His question is, apart from Ronda, do you have any other dream matchups that you have for the division, and how do you think you'd match up with Cris Cyborg if she made it to 135?
No, I don't have any dream matchups. I'll fight whoever the matchmakers tell me to. And one thing I can say is that I'm not afraid of Cris Cyborg, and I'll fight her 150 pounds, 145 pounds, 125 pounds, whatever pounds you guys want to make, I'll fight her. I'll fight anybody. I'll fight anyone tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully she doesn't make it up to 210 pounds, because that would be a heavy fight for you. Now, Julianna, we're
Well,
almost...
I can't even ever hit the scale at 150 pounds, so that's just me getting excited. But I just want to emphasize that I'll fight anybody on any given Sunday. I'll fight anyone.
Great to hear. Now, Julianna, before we let you go, we're going to do a really quick little thing with you. It's called the Submission Radio Tap Out Round. We throw a bunch of fun questions at you, and you sort of answer with the first sort of few things that come to your mind. Are you ready?
Great. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Now, Julianna, you sent out a tweet addressing a very important issue the other day. I'm going to read it out. Is it bad that I think Invicta Fights has got it all wrong with the ring girls for an all-girls card? Where's the beef, hashtag ring boys, hashtag hello, hashtag I want. Now, Julianna, give us your argument for this male ring dudes argument. What's your theory behind this?
No, I'm serious. Where's the beef? Like, how come there's an all-girls card where everyone in the cage is female, and then there's females walking around as ring girls, which is fine. I love ring girls, but I want to know if for all girls, am I the only one that wants to see a hot, hunky guy, walking around like an equivalent to Ariane Celeste and walking around with a ring card? Like, I guess I'm the only one, and so that's fine. I'm generally the only one to go against the grain on a lot of situations anyways, but I would love nothing more than for me to be fighting and a hot, hunky guy walking around the cage. I think that would be awesome.
Wow, well, you've definitely sold us, Julianna.
Yeah, and I just want to say, if they ever do bring that in, I feel like they should name them ring dudes and not ring boys, because it just doesn't have the same sound as ring girls.
Well, like, I was thinking like ring girl, and then I'm thinking what's the opposite of girl? Girl, boy, so ring boy. And so that's the only reason why I said ring boy, but what I really meant is ring hot piece of tall, dark, and handsome, just any guy with a six-pack that looks good, GQ type guy, like anybody that's just hot, so I'm all for it.
Yeah, me and Casper, we're available most weekends, so we'll see what we can do about that.
Ring guys also. I'm not in marketing, but ring guys would also suffice. Just quickly to finish this tap out, give us your strangest fan interaction thus far in your UFC career, Julianna.
Well, one of them just recently sent me a picture to sign for myself, and it was quite embarrassing. It was like the worst picture I think I've ever seen of myself. And not to be gross, like my shorts are like all the way up my crotch, had some camel toe peeking out, and I was like, why would anybody want me to sign this? My eyes look all cross-eyed and stuff, and I'm just like, this is the worst picture ever. It was so weird. I was like, I'm not signing this. Here's an autographed picture of myself, and I sent it back. And another one, some guy wanted me to like sign his neck, and I was like, are you sure? I was like, what a weirdo, like sign his neck, really? But yeah, so those are probably the only two I can think of, and they're really embarrassing. So
give us any strange superstitions that you can share with us that you do before a fight.
I carry around my I guess I can't think of the word, but I'll say trinkets. I am quite superstitious, and I have these little trinkets that my brothers and sisters gave to me, and little reminders of things that I took with me on The Ultimate Fighter. And I carried them around with me before every fight, and I carried them around with me for the finale, and I still, have them on my mantelpiece, and they'll be coming off the shelf here in the next couple of weeks to come with me to Virginia. And they're just kind of like good luck charms and things that, just remind me of why I'm doing this and who I'm doing it for. And that's for myself and for my family.
I feel like we're learning a lot about you today, Julianna. Just quickly finish this sentence. People don't know that I...
people don't know that I really love to sleep a lot.
How good is sleeping? Sleeping's so good.
So
sorry,
you're one of those types that wakes up at sort of like 2 in the afternoon. Is that what you're telling me on a Saturday afternoon? You like a good sleep in?
Embarrassingly, absolutely, that is correct. Also, it's good for a fighter to get their rest. They need their sleep and they need their bodies to recover. So I'm definitely like a hibernating bear in between training sessions, and during training camp, I try to sleep as much as I can. If I'm not training, I'm sleeping.
Oh, that's right. Julianna, you're not a serious sleeper unless you have one of those sleeping hats that sort of sag down to the side with a little thing on top. So now, one of the final questions. You're on an island. You can only bring 3 things with you. What do you choose?
A radio, chapstick, and a hot guy that knows how to build a fire.
I don't think he'd be around on that island very long, Julianna. Like, if a bear came, you've got the hot guy, he'd get eaten in the chapstick. Well, you can't really do much with that, but we respect your choices nevertheless. Last question. What's the official prediction? How are you beating Milana at UFC Fight Night 63? What's the official prediction?
Round 1, TKO or knockout.
Well, there you go, guys. It's going to be an exciting fight. Make sure you check it out. And make sure you follow Julianna on Twitter. She's got a lot of fun stuff up there. If you don't follow her, make sure to check her out at Venezuelan Vixen. She's always got a lot of great stuff up there. Julianna, it's always a pleasure being able to speak with you. And we're very excited to see your return in April. It's going to be a great fight.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate the time. Thanks for calling. Thank you.
Hey, this is Alistair Overeem, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
Our next guest is an MMA veteran who's made a name for himself as one of the most dangerous light heavyweights in the world. Bringing intensity to the cage, he has won most of his fights via knockout, winning the knockout of the night and the fight of the night bonuses in the UFC. He now returns to fight Matt Hamill at World Series of Fighting 19 on the 28th of March as a semi-final in a tournament to determine the new World Series of Fighting light heavyweight champion. Thiago Silva, welcome to Submission Radio.
Hey, how are you?
Doing really good, really good, Thiago. It's great to have you on the show. What about yourself? How are you going?
I'm doing good, man. I've been training hard, getting ready for this fight. So, so far everything is doing so very well.
Well, we're all excited to see you back in the cage. It's going to be a great moment. Before we break down the matchup between you and Matt Hamill, many fans may not know that you grew up in some pretty dangerous area in Brazil. For those who don't know, how difficult was it growing up in Brazil, and what drove you to take up MMA?
To be honest, in Brazil, it's a different life, it's way different than the U.S. or other countries, It's really tough, actually, when you don't have much money. But, I think at some point that helped me, a little bit, to get more motivation, and go after my things, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I can't say that helped a little bit,
Yeah, absolutely. Thiago, kids are often motivated from the influences of their idols. Who are some of the guys that you'd watch in MMA that inspired you to get into the sport?
I love Vanderlei Silva. I watched him since I was a kid. I think he was my favorite fighter. He's still my favorite fighter. I like his style. He's aggressive. He's a good striker. I like to stand up. So I think Vanderlei, was the guy who gave a lot of the biggest motivation, to fight,
Yeah, and we've seen some of your older fights in Brazil, and there's definitely a lot of Vanderlei. We see a lot of Vanderlei Silva in you. When you first took up MMA, did you ever think that you'd be such a big star on the sport, and was the world title always your main goal?
To be honest, I don't. It's like always you want to be something. You wanna be like successful. But I'll do my best. When I go to fight, I fight hard. I try to do my best always, and I don't like to lose.
Yeah, absolutely, Thiago. Now, you've been out of action for about a year and a half. How's training camp been so far for your big return, and how are you feeling?
I feel great. I just had a knee surgery 7 months ago. I've been doing a lot of therapy, a lot of physical therapy, a lot of training, conditioning and strength, to get the muscles to get strong again. So yeah, I've been training hard. Like I said, I try to push hard as much as I can. I like to improve myself always. That's what I do.
Yeah, and Thiago, we know that in the past you've had some issues with your back that limited some of your wrestling. How's the back feeling now?
The back's great. I had a lot of treatments and a lot of physical therapists. I had a physical therapist who helping me, to recover the back. Thanks God, the back's really good right now. So yeah, I'm 100% healthy.
Well, that's great to hear. And with such a long layoff, tell us, what are some of the new skills that you've been working on, with your coach Henri Hooft and the Blackzilians over there?
The Blackzilians, it's excellent. It's an excellent gym. We have really good fighters, a lot of different fighters, different styles, and good coaches. So I think I made the right decision to move it to Blackzilians. And we train hard every day. We push hard each other. So yeah, I'm sharper. I'm ready to fight anytime, anywhere, with anyone.
Absolutely. And, with Blackzilians, that's your home, basically. And it's also home to some of the sport's greatest fighters. You've got guys like Rashad Evans, Vitor Belfort, Matt Mitrione, Eddie Alvarez, Anthony Johnson, Tyrone Spong, and, of course, Henri Hooft. I'm just curious. You and Rashad obviously fought at, I believe it was UFC 108. What's it like being training partners these days?
Yeah, for sure. It's we fought 5 years ago. That was part of the business, but right now we are good friends. We help each other. We train hard, So I like Rashad. He's a very good guy, So yeah, it's really good to have good guys around,
I was very interested when you mentioned that you switched camps. There's a new season of The Ultimate Fighter that was recently announced. It's going to be two of the best Coconut Creek MMA camps in America, top team, and the Blackzilians versing each other. You obviously trained both. For those who don't know the history, what's the rivalry between the two camps?
It's a little complicated, because the peoples, who started the Blackzilians was the people they don't get along with American top team because of the coaches, like a personal problems, missing trainings, something like that. But yeah, we are rivals for sure. We don't like American top team at all. So I think that people, they're gonna get surprised when they watch the show. They're gonna really get surprised.
Well, it's an interesting concept, and obviously, whoever is the not winning team, but the team in the lead and has control, they'll be fighting at their own gym. Who are some of the guys from the Blackzilians that people may not know about, but should be looking out for on the show?
Yeah, we have a tough guys, like a Buscapé, Jason Jackson, Nakahara. We have a good fighters. They don't have a big name yet. But they're really tough, and like I said, people they're gonna love when they watch the show. They're gonna have a lot of fun watching.
Now, speaking of heated rivalries, Thiago, a couple of years ago, you and Bigfoot Silva shared some words and even wanted to fight each other. Just wondering, is this a fight that you still want and would be interested in?
I fight for money. I have nothing against Bigfoot. So he likes to talk, he's a big talker. Mm-hmm. He likes to talk, but I fight for money. I fight for fun too. If he wants to fight in the future, he's more than welcome. I don't care. I fight anyone. I don't care. And to be honest, I don't care.
Well, we like the attitude. Thiago, let's talk about your matchup. You and Matt Hamill are obviously fighting each other at World Series of Fighting 19, March 28th. So that's basically next weekend. You guys are in the light heavyweight tournament semi-final. The funny thing is, of course, that your last fight was against Matt Hamill, and his last fight was obviously the very same one in the UFC. What did you think, when you found out that you'd be fighting Matt again?
To be honest, I'm very excited because right now I'm gonna have the opportunity to finish my job. I couldn't knock him out on the last fight, and but this time I will knock him out for sure. I've been training so hard. I'm really focused on my training, on my camp. And I'm proving myself really, really hard. So this time I'm gonna just finish the job.
Well, it's going to be very exciting to watch. And without a shadow of a doubt, Matt has achieved a lot in MMA. He's a tough challenge. What do you feel like will be your advantages over him in this rematch?
I'm stronger than him. I'm better than him. I have a better strike. I have a better ground game. And I'm tough. So I'm gonna move forward like I always do, you know.
And the other thing about Matt is I believe he's retired twice before, and now he's coming out of retirement, to face a guy that he's already lost to. What are your thoughts about that and about Matt retiring twice and coming back?
It's really hard to talk about that because we never know exactly what happened, you know. But the real thing is, if it hits back, means he wants to fight. So let's see what's gonna happen. It's really just to talk about people, you know. I don't really like to talk about people who are their decisions, you know.
Sure.
So I just see the facts, you know. If he's back, that means he wants to fight. So let's do it. Let's see what's gonna happen.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the prize that you're fighting for. You were close to fighting for the title in the UFC on a number of occasions. How excited are you to have a shot at being the World Series of Fighting light heavyweight champion? And what would it mean to you if you won the title?
That's a really, really good opportunity. It's a great opportunity. I'm so happy for this, you know. So I want the title for sure. I'm gonna fight hard. I'm gonna get the title. The title is gonna be mine. And I have plans, you know, for this show, for this tournament, and I'm going after the title. Nobody's going to stop me.
I know that obviously your time with World Series of Fighting, it's pretty fresh. You're yet to make your debut. What are your thoughts on being with the company so far compared to the UFC, and are you enjoying your experience with World Series of Fighting?
You know, I think your Series, they're very professional. You know, they have a really good organization. You know, UFC, they are the number one, but World Series is still good. They're still very professional. They work hard. They pay good their fighters. They treat them good. So it's important. That's the most important to me, you know.
Absolutely. Now, we have a couple of fan questions that we want to ask you, Thiago. We let the fans know that you're coming on the show, and you've got a lot of fans around the world, so we chose a couple of questions. The first one comes from a username, the MMA Professor. He'd like to know, Thiago, you fought some of the best light heavyweights in the world. If you could have one rematch, who would it be with and why?
I want Lyoto Machida.
Oh, wow.
That was the only guy who knocked me out, you know, and that is really hard to swallow, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanna if I wanna have a rematch, he probably is the first one. You know, I wanna pay back. Like I said, I hate losing. You know, the first time he was my first defeat, and when I lost to him, I didn't sleep for like 2 months. You know,
wow,
it was like really bad to me. You know, I hate lose, man. You know, so yeah, I want him.
We're like that when we play Xbox, so we understand you. Not in the sense of a fighter, we understand where you're coming from. You know, another fan question, Cherry King. His question is, Thiago, the UFC released you and then re-signed you and then released you. Do you have any bad feelings towards the company for doing that? Or would you be open to returning one day, possibly?
Not at all. You know, it's a part of the business. You know, they made the decision they thought was the right decision to do it. So, you know, just move on. I just move on. Like I said, I'm gonna do my best and show my work and fight hard as always I do. You know.
Yeah, well, we're very excited to see it. Now, Thiago, this is the part of the interview where we do a thing called the Submission Radio Tap Out Round. It's a really fun game where we give you some fun questions and you answer with the first thing that comes to your mind, sort of like word association. Are you ready?
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, give us your go-to move when you're doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and you're rolling with somebody. What's one move that you love to go to?
Half guard.
Really? So no submissions, you just love to go from the half guard?
Yes, I like half guard ankle pick. Yeah.
Hey, some of the greatest guys like to work from half guard. Thiago, what was your strangest fan interaction thus far in your career?
I don't know. That's really weird. This question. I really don't know.
Well, we once spoke to Bob Sapp from Pride, and he said that a naked woman jumped on his taxi once in Japan. So we hear some weird ones. Now, do you have any superstitions that you can share with us before a fight? What's something that you do, like a superstition that you might do before a fight?
To be honest, I have none. You know, like I don't believe that. And when I go to fight, I don't believe in nothing. I believe in myself. That's it. You know.
Thiago, when you're cutting weight, what's the most difficult food to stay away from?
Food, carbohydrate, like a pasta. You know, I love pasta, man.
Oh yeah, it must be tough sometimes when you're watching ads and it pops on TV. Give us.
I hate salad, man.
Yeah, salads suck.
You don't make friends with salad. Now, Thiago, it's always difficult. We get guys on the tap out round and we ask them this question, and it's difficult for them. So we'll let you choose a couple. Give us a couple of your favorite movies. What are a couple of movies that stand out to you as the best movies for you?
The movies, Scarface. I like war movies. You know, the Sniper, the one they just made it. American Sniper. That was a really, really good movie. You know, I like 300. You know, I like Warriors. You know.
Yeah. Now, Thiago, you train with some of the greatest fighters, and a lot of them seem like good guys. We've had some of them on the show. Who is the biggest practical joker in your team?
Joker? I don't know. Rashad?
If I had to guess, I would have said Rashad as well. Has he ever played any practical jokes on you?
Not with me, but he plays with a lot of guys, you know.
Yeah, we had Henri Hooft on the show.
He's funny, you know. He's funny.
Yeah, we had Henri Hooft on the show a few weeks back, and I believe he said that Rashad's got a great sense of humor. It'd be great to see what it's like. Now, Thiago, I want you to finish this sentence for us, okay? Finish the sentence. People don't know that I...
But they know what I do.
Okay.
All right, Thiago, here's an interesting one. We like getting the different answers from all our guests. You're on an island and you can only bring 3 things. What do you bring?
Wow, man, that's crazy. 3 things in an island?
Yep.
I don't know, man. Food, Xbox, and my girl.
But what are you going to plug the Xbox in? You're on an island. You need like an adapter or something.
I love video games. Actually, I'm here for TV playing Grand Theft Auto. I like Gears of War too, you know. I love video games, you know. When I'm not fighting, when I'm not training, I'm home chilling, playing video game, you know. I like to stay home, like to play video games. It's nice. It's fun.
I actually heard in the background at the start of the interview, I heard the little sound for the Xbox turning on. What games do you play? What do you like, Thiago?
I like Grand Theft Auto. I like Gears of War, you know, I'll play a little bit UFC too, but I like war games, you know, shooting games.
Yeah, the UFC game must be frustrating when you play as yourself sometimes and the computer beats you and then you get angry at the computer and you want to beat him back.
Well, I like the UFC game, but I think the ground game is too unfair, you know, it's like really hard to play, so that's bullshit for me, you know. The game is awesome, but the ground game is bullshit, you know. They should work on it and make something better because it's too unfair, you know.
Yeah, it's like you lose to a guy and then you go, hey, that's bullshit. I actually beat this guy in real life and I can't beat him in this video game. It's ridiculous. Now, now give us, you know, you're a knockout artist. I introduced you as a guy that has won most of his fights by KO. What's your favorite knockout that you've ever done?
Against Feijão, Rafael.
Yeah.
On the UFC, I think it was that one was a nice one against Feijão.
Well, Thiago, you pretty much said what you wanted to do to Matt Hamill, but give us the official prediction. How are you beating Matt Hamill at World Series of Fighting 19?
I'm gonna rush him so hard. I'm gonna punch him and kick him so hard, and he's gonna fail. That's gonna happen.
Well, you know what? I can't wait to see it. Guys, you can follow Thiago on Twitter at Thiago Silva _MMA and watch him take on Matt Hamill at World Series of Fighting 19, March 28th. A new light heavyweight champion will be crowned, and we're talking to one of the guys who may be the new champion. Thiago, it's been an absolute pleasure, and best of luck in your fight against Matt Hamill.
That was my pleasure. You guys are more than welcome to reach me up when you guys want. This is Jake Ellenberger, and you guys are listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. Our next guest is a former world champion judoka. She has a PhD in educational psychology and these days is more commonly referred to as Ronda Rousey's mum. She is none other than AnnMaria DeMars, and she's on Submission Radio, and it's a pleasure. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. You know what? It's actually... Lots of times I'm not Ronda Rousey's mom. In fact, you know, I work in a completely different field. And so I had somebody ask me at a conference, I heard your daughter's at MoMA. which is the Museum of Modern Art. What does she do? Is she a sculpture? And I said, no, she doesn't do that kind of art. It's not MoMA, it's MMA.
Oh my God! Wow. Yeah. Now, I mean, she's an artist in her own right, but it's definitely not with sculptures. Now, just to kick it off, and a few weeks removed from UFC 184 and Ronda's great performance over Kat, watching the fight live, what was the experience like for you?
Oh my God, I'm always so nervous when she fights. I mean, I know that she's trained hard. I know she does all the right things, but there's always that possibility of a freak accident. And ever since that fight where Anderson Silva fought right after her and broke his leg in a pretty crazy way, it's just really nerve-wracking.
Absolutely. And something we've always wanted to ask you, Anne, is after a lot of Ronda's fights, you and her often walk back to the locker room with your arms over each other. Just wondering, what kind of stuff do you talk about when you're walking back with Ronda? And, what are those moments like? You recently had one at UFC 184. What did you say to each other after that fight?
Oh, I'm so proud of her. She did great, because it's always such a relief when it's all over. And for everybody, even if it's 15 seconds or 16 seconds of a fight, it's still that huge buildup for weeks leading up to it with the training, and then the days before, and cutting the weight and being in the back there getting ready to fight. So for everybody, it's just a huge relief. So yeah, I just tell her I love her and I'm proud of her, and that was great.
Yeah.
Last time, this time was better. Last time I told her if you had armbarred that girl instead of punched her, you wouldn't be getting your hand stitched up now. And she said, only you could tell me if I defended a world title in 16 seconds, I could have done it better.
That's hilarious. Well, it must be awesome, obviously, you and Ronda being able to share those moments. Before we talk about Ronda's great achievements in MoMA and her fantastic sculptures and things like that, we want to go back in time and discuss some of your amazing accomplishments. When Ronda was being interviewed post-fight, she mentioned you once won by submission in a few seconds. Do you recall the match, and can you tell us about it?
Yes, I do, because my teammates teased me about it unmercifully. We were in the Canada Cup. It's what they call the Rendezvous now. It's an international tournament. It's mostly all the top Canadian and U.S. players. And there's a few other countries come, and this girl was from some country, I'm sorry, I'd never heard of, one of those tiny little island countries. And they said, and I had the person from the U.S. that was number 2 from the U.S. was on the other side of the bracket. So right after this fight, I was going to have to fight her probably. And so I wanted this match over as soon as possible. So I grabbed the girl, threw an armbar on her, and snapped her arm, and that was it. And when I got up, there was 1 second on the clock.
Wow.
And Ronda to this day, because they started the clock slow, I said, hey, I was faster when I was young. And I remember, because my teammates tease me about it all the time. They're like, that's the only person in that country you will ever meet, and you broke her arm.
Wow, that would have been an amazing spectacle. Now, for people that don't know how you got into the sport, you and Judo Gene LaBelle are very closely related. Was he one of the motivators for you to get into Judo at 12 years old, or how did you first get into it?
No, not at all. I didn't meet Gene until I was an adult. I wasn't very old. I was probably in my early 20s, but I was a short, fat little kid, and I had really thick glasses, and I spent all my time sitting up in my room reading and eating. And my mother said, you can't live like this. You're going to be 400 pounds by the time you're an adult. And she put me in the car, and she drove me down to the YMCA, opened the door, and shoved me out and said, go join a sport. And when you're fat, and back then, they didn't, there were a lot of sports that didn't allow girls to play. That was legal back then. They would just say, we don't have any girls track, or we don't have any girls basketball. So the only 3 sports that girls could pick from was swimming, which if you're a fat little girl, you don't want to wear a swimsuit, right? Or track, which if you're a short, fat little girl, you don't run very fast. And then the other one was judo, because the judo instructor had a sister, and she had wanted to do judo. And by the time I came along, she was a black belt. So I picked judo, and I was a short, fat little kid, so they couldn't get underneath me to lift me up because I was so short. And they couldn't push me over because I was so fat. And I lost weight and won the world championships eventually, and it all worked out.
Wow, there you go. The rest is history. I wanted to ask you, though, you mentioned how difficult it was for you to get in there being a girl. We here in Japan, it's even harder, and they rarely even teach white people. Being female and being a white person, when you went on the exchange program when you were 18, how hard was it to learn judo, and what was your experience like, considering they wouldn't teach many, outsiders?
I had a really good experience by dumb luck. Partly, first of all, my university had an agreement with Waseda University in Japan. So it was already set up by the universities that I would go there. And so they kind of, had an incentive to be nice to me because our universities had an agreement. And then I didn't know anything. I came from a university in the Midwest, so I didn't really know anybody that was Japanese except for my Japanese language instructor at university. So I had no idea what I was walking into. So I just went in and said, can I train with the college judo team? And they thought it was hilariously funny. It'd be like walking out to one of the campuses here and some, little girl, I was 18, I was, 120 pounds, walking up and saying, can I train with your football team? But here's the thing that happened. There's a head instructor, and Japan is, at least at that time, was very hierarchical. And there was an assistant instructor. And the assistant instructor immediately said, no, you can't train with us. And that really kind of ticked off the head instructor because, who are you to say I'm the head guy? So he said, yes, you can. So that's how I got on the team. And he also told me later he had trained he traveled a lot to the U.S. and to other English-speaking countries, and people had always been really kind to him. And so he felt like he should repay that kindness. And he might not have said yes to me, but he was just so put out by how the other guy just right away jumped and said, no, you can't do it. And I was kind of shocked because, I had no idea what I was doing. So, yeah, I was just plain dumb luck. So I trained with the Alaska University team for the year. I was in school there. And then I went to the Kodokan in the evenings. And back then, they only let women train in the women's division. And so I mostly trained all of the women. But every now and then, and again, it was just because I didn't have the sense to know that this was inappropriate. Like, I'd be watching the tournament and see some guy do an amazing Ojigari, and I would run down on the floor after the tournament was over and grab the guy and say, that was awesome. Can you show me how to do that? And they would.
Wow.
And looking back on it now, that assistant instructor, everything that you've achieved in your judo career must be laughing about trying to knock you back from the class. I want to talk to you about a very special year in your career, 1984. You come out of retirement and you win the World Judo Championships, becoming the first person representing the United States to win a World Judo Championships. It must have been an amazing moment, an amazing experience, such a special time. Can you take us back to that moment and tell us how you felt and what happened and the emotions you went through when you won that championship?
Well, it's better than anything. You can't imagine. It's just like if all of your dreams come true at once. Because for me, ever since I heard there was national championships, I wanted to win it. And ever since they started a world championship, I wanted to win that. And I fought somebody from Australia, Sue Williams, in the finals. And we had fought once before, and she was the toughest person I ever fought. So I knew it was going to be a hard match. And when it came down to it, it was, near the end, I just did everything I could to try to throw her and hit her. And she did everything she could to try and stop me. And I know in judo, the referee doesn't vote, the guy in the middle, unless it's split. And so what happens, so they hold up, now it's blue and white. They hold up one white flag. They hold up a flag for either person, right? Either white or red. And you can tell if the referee agrees because he agrees with the guy he's looking at. He doesn't have to look at the other guy, right? Because you won.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, yeah. So he looked at the first guy, and then he turned around and looked at the other guy, and both of them had given it to me, so I got it. So it was that close that the referee had to check. But yeah, it was amazing because I'd won a lot of other stuff up to then, but that was. I had my knee replaced because I had torn it up so bad that I knew I didn't have another tournament in me after this. If I'd taken one shot the wrong way, I wouldn't be walking. So it was my absolute last chance, and that made it quite great.
Wow, that's crazy. And and in hindsight, looking back at yourself back in those days, if women's MMA was at the level of popularity that it is now, do you think you would have competed in the sport yourself?
I think if it was like it is now, I'd be more likely to do MMA than judo because judo has changed a lot from what it was back then. There's a lot of things in judo that were legal then that aren't legal now.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was much more like a fight then than it is now. So I think if things were the same, I would be more likely to go into MMA for a while. So I don't think I would do like Ronda did and make it as much of a career. I would probably go to win the world title and then go off to graduate school like I did because I like math.
Now, you brought up judo, and we have a few questions about judo. The first one is there seems to be some friction between judo in Europe and the UFC and mixed martial arts as a whole. Recently, Jean-Luc Rouge, and I'm sorry if I butchered up that name, who's the head of the French Judo Federation, has warned that anyone in judo caught teaching MMA will be removed from the French Judo Federation. Can you shed any light on why the European judo community is so against mixed martial arts, and do you think it's warranted in any way?
I think it's not warranted. I can speculate, and I don't know. But one thing about judo that I do know is it's run in a very authoritarian way. That there are people at the top, and they tell you what to do, and there are people that they have hired as a black belt, they tell you what to do. And MMA isn't like that. You fight your way up, and it's a lot more of a meritocracy than in judo. There's no belts. You don't vote on who's the world champion. You don't, if somebody, wherever they're from, keeps fighting and they keep going, it doesn't matter what club they're from, they end up at the top. And if you're the world champion, you're not really beholden to any organization other than the one that signs your paycheck. So I think they're threatened by that because it's a very different system than they're used to. And judo always claims to be the second most practiced sport in the world. But, I've been around the world a lot, and I have not seen that to be the case. I mean, there's a lot of people do judo in Japan. A lot of people do judo in France. Presumably, there's a good number in Brazil. But there's a lot of people who do a lot of other sports. So I think judo is continually claiming to be a much bigger sport than it is. And they're threatened when something seems likely to pull people out of that. Because in the U.S., for example, you can make a lot of money in MMA, and you can't make hardly anything doing judo. You'd be lucky if you can support yourself.
Yeah.
I think as more people see that internationally, they've got to start asking themselves, I go to the Olympics and I win a gold medal, and maybe, if I'm lucky, I get $250,000. Very often I get far less than that. If I win one fight in MMA and I'm good, I'll get 10 times that. So perhaps this would be a better thing for me. And people who say money isn't everything are always those people who have plenty of money and don't have to worry about sending their kids to college and buying food.
Yeah, exactly. Money's huge for us. But I guess the one thing with judo is its strong roots in the Olympics. Here's a wild one. Do you ever think that we'll see MMA become an Olympic sport?
I think it's rather unlikely unless the rules change a great deal. Because if you look, for example, at boxing in the Olympics, or Taekwondo, they're a lot more on point. So I think that there would have to be a lot of rule changes. Well, I kind of doubt it.
Let's have a quick chat about Ronda. Talk to us about the moment that Ronda first came up to you. Obviously, she's one of the best judo players in the world. Comes up to you and tells you, "Mom, I want to try MMA. This is something that I want to do." What was your first reaction? What did you first think when you heard this?
Can I swear on your radio station?
Absolutely. That's absolutely fine, Ann.
Okay, well, what I told her is, Ronda, that's the stupidest fucking idea I have ever heard in my life. And coming from you, that says something, because you have come up with some dumbass ideas. And I told, absolutely not. I supported you through 2 Olympics. You have 3 sisters. We made a lot of sacrifices. One of her sisters got into a very, very good private high school, and she went to a different high school. It was good, but not as good, because the one she got into was $20,000 a year, and St. Mary's was $5,000. And, the extra money was going to Ronda's Olympic, training. And so I said, a lot of people in this family made sacrifices for you for 2 Olympics. And before that, we paid for you to travel around the world to train, and now you have a little sister who's going into high school soon. We have to stay for her college. And, you may have a dream to be a world champion, but I have a dream to retire someday, and I am not supporting able-bodied adults. No, absolutely not. Dumb idea, don't do it. So, and of course, she brings up, cannot hear me often enough say that I was wrong about this. But I thought it was the stupidest idea I've ever heard in my life.
It's funny how you mentioned that, your dream was to retire someday. Looking at that now, considering with all of Ronda's success and things like that, how are you feeling now?
Well, I'm very happy for her. I mean, I still run a company. I still have to, make a living because I'm an adult and I don't believe in, being dependent on other people.
Of course.
I think she should be independent. But I'm very, very happy for her. And she did a really good thing. Sorry, that's my GPS.
That's all right.
You're getting close to your destination now.
A lot of people have tried to tell me where to get off. Only my GPS gets away with it. So anyway, Ronda did a really good thing, and she kind of teases me about this and says that, I'm a hypocrite to have challenged her on it because, I started a video gaming company when I was in my late 40s. I've been early 50s. Anyway, certainly not when people do that sort of thing. And she said, I come from a whole family of women who do things they're not expected to do. So when she said she wanted to go into MMA, there was no money in it. Nobody was making a living in it. She, it's sort of like I said, I'm going to become a professional knitter. I'm going to knit sweaters out of, sheep's wool, and that will be and I will compete in that professionally and make a ton of money. And you would just say, that's stupid. No one does that. And basically made a career for herself. So good for her.
Well, there's been plenty of judo players in mixed martial arts in the past. However, none of them have been as successful as Ronda has. What do you think about Ronda's judo? What do you think that makes it so successful in MMA, in your opinion?
Well, I think one reason is that she's got a mix of styles. If you are, I don't know how familiar you are with judo, but basically there's two general overall styles. There's the Japanese, very pretty, technical, and there's the European sort of brawl, catch as catch can. And Ronda, when she was young, because we were fortunate enough to live in Los Angeles, there's a lot of judo clubs, I would take her to different clubs that epitomize both of those styles. So unlike most people, she learned both. So she has a much bigger repertoire. So I think that's a strength for her. Well, I was going to say, I think also sometimes you see people like Rick Hahn, some of these other guys, they come in after the Olympics. So they're really, their peak years, they devoted to Olympic level competition. And then after that, they come in to the MMA world and, they're really not at their peak athletically. Maybe they've got a lot more injuries because they spent many years competing at the Olympic level in judo, where Ronda took a real leap of faith. She did not go to the 2012 Olympics, so she quit Olympic level judo before she was at her prime and spent her prime years in MMA. So I think it's both a combination of her style and also her timing.
That's a really interesting point about, Olympic level athletes going to MMA and other sports after the Olympics and being out of their primes. I also heard, I think it's pretty well known now, but I just want to confirm with you that you would basically jump on Ronda and she would wake up with you applying an armbar on her as she was waking up, yelling, "Always be ready." Is that true, Ann?
Oh yeah. My coach used to do that to me too. I used to stay over at my coach's house because his fiance was a really dear friend of mine. And I was working as an engineer, so I would come up on the weekends and stay at Jimmy and Dawn's house. And yeah, he would wake up in the morning and, have Dawn jump on me and armbar me and tell us to, knock out 50 armbars when I just woke up from a dead sleep. And I'm so not a morning person. Yeah. And Dawn would be saying, "Come on, just do it. I'll give you coffee after." And so I did the same thing to Ronda. And, and people act like it's just terrible when she was tortured. I mean, fathers wrestle around with their kids and nobody thinks they're beating them.
Yeah.
But yes, I used to do this all the time. And the idea being that you should be able to do an armbar out of a backflip if you just woke up from a dead sleep. And she can do it, as you saw at the last match.
And, there has been some speculation. Ronda's mentioned that if she went into judo and on the Olympics, there's a good chance she might win it. Do you think she'd ever have another chance, or she'd ever want to go back into the Olympics one more time down the road and maybe compete one more time?
No. She's not going to fight for free. She makes a ton of money doing what she's doing. And Ronda's very smart. One of the things people don't know about her is how smart she really is. She went to a special school here for kids who were excellent in math and science. And we always thought, when she was younger, that she would end up getting her PhD in oceanography or something like that. So she really, she realizes that she has a very short window remaining as an athlete. And her opportunity is to make a few $1 million in those remaining years or go to the Olympics and fight for free. And she's not that dumb.
You know, and I think most people, or predominantly people, have been really, I guess, for a long time, MMA was a man's sport, and now that women's MMA is here and it's here to stay, most people have been really accepting. I just want to get your opinion on something. You know, Fedor, he sounded a little bit like your YMCA coach. He said a few things that women isn't a sport, sorry, MMA isn't a sport for women, and here's a quote that he said: there are a lot of sports where women look like women, like gymnastics, water sports, maybe some athletics. MMA is for men. From essentially a guy who's an idol and legend in the sport, and I know Ronda looked up to him, you know, what do you think about that?
Well, he's entitled to his opinion. I disagree with it.
And, you know, something, Ann, it seems like recently every reporter out there and every news website was always talking about Ronda Rousey. What would happen if she fought a man? What would happen if she versed a man in MMA? Ronda versus a man scenario. You know, even Ian McCauley was recently in an interview where he said, if I put on a gi and she's an Olympian, she's not going to throw me on my head. It's not going to happen. I'll throw her on her head. You know, just wondering, what do you make of all these comments about people comparing Ronda to fighting men, and, you know, Ian's comments about her not being able to throw him? What do you make of all this?
Oh, I just think it's all a joke. I have a friend of mine sent me a text the other day. She said, yeah, I got really bored reading legal briefs, so I started to read these comments on the internet. The latest one is, could Ronda Rousey defeat God? I just think it's people that really don't have enough to do. You know, my oldest daughter was a sports writer for 10 years, and when Ronda was at her first Olympics, Maria was actually there covering it for Sports Illustrated, the magazine. And she said it was odd how in judo people would say, oh, you know, she couldn't be beat up. But she said in track, we never see that. You never see somebody say, oh, you know, this woman did a really great job, but she couldn't outrun Usain Bolt. I mean, who cares? You know, they're two different things. It's sort of like saying, could the guy who won the lightweight division in wrestling, could he beat the heavyweight? It just seems sort of a silly thing to be having a debate about. You know, he won the Olympics. Good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's almost in a lot of ways, almost like a compliment, because people see her as such a dominant force, as Casper said. One person that's brought up Ronda's name is another fantastic athlete, another fantastic female athlete, Laila Ali. Now, obviously, she's an accomplished boxer, and now the media is trying to build up sort of a rivalry between the two. You know, would you ever see Ronda have a sort of a showcase bout against Laila in a matchup one day, sort of similar to what Judo Jean LaBelle did back in the day? Sort of with judo versus boxing, but, you know, Ronda's an amazing boxer, so she'd more than likely be able to stay in the ring with Ali and really possibly even dominate her. Who even knows?
The only way I could possibly see that happening, and I wouldn't put it past her, would be something for charity. One of the things that people don't know about Ronda is that she does a lot of things to raise money for charity, for the World Food Program, for mental health services here in Los Angeles, for conservation of endangered species. So she does a ton of things like that. So, I mean, this is the only way I could possibly see it happening. I don't know Laila Ali at all. But if she's the kind of person that does charity things, I could see them putting on some big thing to raise money for, you know, say there was another disaster like the tsunami or Hurricane Katrina or something. I could see them doing something like that, but otherwise, no.
Sure. Well, in terms of a more sort of realistic matchup that may actually happen, obviously Cris Cyborg versus Ronda Rousey is a fight that, you know, everybody would be excited about. You know, you made some intelligent comments about how Ronda Rousey shouldn't have to go up in weight to fight Cris. You know, if the fight does happen one day, how do you see it going, and what do you think of Ronda's advantages over the Brazilian?
Oh, Ronda will break her arm. I can tell you that right now. I'll tell you two things. Ronda will break her arm, and Ronda will not go up in weight. And the reason she won't, partly, is because Cris Cyborg has missed weight multiple times. So if you have her fight at 140, she's going to show up at 145 or 150 and say you sold all the tickets fight me. So that's the first thing. She's going to miss 135. She can at least give Ronda 10% of the purse. And then secondly, she has kind of an inflated record, because if you look back at some of her matches, she's fought women who were like 125 pounds and she was 160. You know, that's like Ronda fighting her little sister and then saying, ooh, look at me, I'm so dominant. So I'm not impressed with her record. And, you know, of course, failing the drug testing, I always feel like that's sort of like if you get a DUI, but that's probably not the only time you were driving drunk. So I, would say her whole record is under suspicion. Certainly the one match she got caught is under suspicion. Well, not suspicion, it's proven. And then there have been, you can look them up, several matches where she missed weight and was 20 pounds or more heavier than the other person. So under those conditions, going bragging how dominant you are does not impress me. And the other thing is, I love Ronda. She's a great person. She has many, many wonderful qualities. But one thing about her is she holds a grudge. And she will break Cris Cyborg's arm.
We saw that, especially at the end of their fight, Miesha Tate versus Ronda Rousey. I just want to also get your thoughts, stylistically. Cris Cyborg's obviously known for her knockout power and her striking, and obviously Ronda Rousey is known for her spectacular judo. Now she's really coming up there with her striking. How do you think the fight would go stylistically? Do you think it'd be another sort of 16-second win? Do you think she'd be able to dominate Ronda in terms of judo?
I think the first time Ronda got hands on her, she would go down and Ronda would break her arm. And here's why. Okay, Ronda had a match with this woman, one of her amateur fights, and I didn't know anything about MMA, and I was all nervous about it. And I was talking to Jim Pedro Sr., who had coached Ronda through a couple of Olympics, and I said, I'm reading what this woman says in the paper, and she's just going to try and stop Ronda from taking her to the ground. She's going to try and stop, Fighter Sting. And I said, that's exactly what you should do. And, I'm worried about this. And Jimmy stopped me. He said, okay, let me get this straight. This woman's plan is to stop Ronda from throwing her an armbar at her. And I said, yes. And he said, well, listen, kid, I took Ronda all over Europe and all over the world and coached her. And every woman in judo, that was their plan, too. You saw how well that worked out for them. And Ronda got a silver in the world. She got a bronze in the Olympics. She won the junior world. She won a lot of international judo tournaments. And this is against women who have decades of experience trying to stop Olympic-level judo players from throwing an armbar. So saying that Cris Cyborg somehow is magically going to be able to do that when Ronda's been training this since she was 11, I don't think that's going to happen. I think the first time Ronda gets her hands on her, she's going to knock her down and break her arm.
Well, that would certainly be a fascinating matchup. And, we want to have a chat about some more fascinating achievements that you've made. Obviously an amazing judoka with an amazing record and huge things accomplished. But another fascinating thing about you is that you're not only, a successful judoka, but you also have a PhD in educational psychology. For all the fans listening out there who didn't really know about that, tell us, how did you get into it? And, what made you want to become a doctor in the field?
Well, I actually wanted to get my PhD in statistics, and my specialization is applied statistics. I was an engineer, and it sounds funny now, but at the time, almost 30 years ago, I was pregnant with Ronda's sister, who's a year older than her, and I asked my doctor, could it be damaging to the baby to spend, 8, 12 hours a day in front of a computer with, vacuum tubes and all that, and at the time, that was a new thing, and female engineers working in the workforce 8 hours a day were a new thing. And he said, we don't know. And I said, well, that's not a good enough answer. So I decided I needed to do something, and there was the University of California there. And, a lot of things I kind of fell into. There's the University of California. I think I'll get a PhD. And I like statistics. And they said, well, you'll probably have a better career if you pick an area to specialize in, like not doing mathematical distributions, but, statistics applied to psychology or education or biology. So I picked educational psychology just because they offered me the most money.
Nice.
That was it.
Well, I was going to say, with your background in educational psychology, was that the inspiration behind 7 Generation Games, your line of educational games, and can you tell us about it all?
Yes, it was actually. When I first applied to graduate school, I wanted to make a game that kids could play to learn math, because I had worked with children who were severely emotionally disturbed, that had been in juvenile court, that just had all kinds of problems, and they kept getting kicked out of school, and they couldn't, they were getting in fights in school, so they weren't learning anything. And I thought, well, if you could use a computer, so they couldn't get in a fight with the computer, right? You can't argue with it. So they could use the computer to learn, and then they could keep up academically, and then the other people in psychology could help their emotional problems. So I did a game like that, but that was many years ago. And, 30 years ago, what you could do with computers versus now is just night and day. So I made a game, but it was just text-based, and so I kind of went off and did other things, got involved in educational testing and did some stuff on biostatistics. And then when the older 3 girls were all out of the house, I didn't have to do all the consulting to just make money, and I I had always wanted to do this, and so the technology kind of got to the point where my ideas were feasible. So that's where I am now. I have never played World of Warcraft or Grand Theft Auto or any of those games, but imagine you were playing that and it taught you algebra.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we actually played around with some of the games. They're really great. People need to check them out, especially, if they have kids like me who had a little bit of ADD growing up. That would have really helped me growing up. Just wondering, with the popularity of MMA, and obviously you mentioned stop kids from getting into fights, would you ever create sort of an educational-based game maybe around judo or MMA in the future?
Well, it's really good you say that, because our next game is coming out. It's aimed more at teenagers and adults, because there's a lot of people that are not very good at math and need to get better at it for whatever reason. They've got to take an employment, pre-employment test or something. So we've kind of been held back in the games up to this point because a lot of them were sold to schools. But yes, and the short answer is yes. I'm sure that we were going to be having games come out with more fighting in them and more adult sort of things in them.
That's awesome. I feel like since autocorrect, I've noticed that over the last year, my spelling has really declined. So if you could get something out that's similar to like EA UFC with like spelling in there, like that would be awesome. I would definitely get that. or Grand Theft Auto. But and we're going to do something fun to wrap up the interview. It's called the Submission Radio Tap Out Round, world renowned to us and our families. We basically fire off a bunch of fun questions and you answer with the first thing that comes to your mind, kind of like word association. Are you ready?
Okay.
All right. Give us your favorite go-to submission when rolling.
Judo Katami, an armbar. Are you kidding?
Of course.
Finish the sentence for us, Ann. People don't know that I
have 3 grandchildren.
Oh, wow. Is there a secret formula to success in judo or grappling you can share with us?
No one has the right to beat you, ever, ever, ever. If you train like that every day, you will beat everybody eventually.
You mentioned in an older interview with Fightland that when you were younger, you wanted to beat people up on and off the mat. What do you feel like when you step onto the mat now, these days, all these years later?
Well, when I step on the mat now, it's funny because I'm actually driving to judo practice. I'll be there in about 10 minutes. Now, I just want to help the kids get better. I don't have anything to prove anymore. I'm old. If someone comes up to me and they say, some guy that's 180 pounds comes up and says to me, you want to spar? I said, no, are you insane? I'm old enough to be your grandmother. Go fight that guy over there. So now I just want to help the next generation get better. That's how I feel.
Nice. What's one thing that could be improved about the direction of the sport of judo, in your opinion?
There's so many.
Yeah, that's probably a big question.
I think if they threw out belt ranks altogether, that would vastly improve the sport, because then you would be judged on your performance and not on getting a bunch of your buddies to say you're good or donating money from there. I think throwing out the belt ranks altogether is vastly.
We always see countdown videos. People are always training, lifting big, heavy weights, but not many people speak about the mental game. How important is the mental game in competition, in your opinion?
At the top level, it's critically important, because when you're at the Olympics, no one's out of shape. No one's sucking wind. No one, everyone is in good physical condition, so it's a constant. So the only thing left is the mental game, because there really isn't that much difference in technique either. Everyone knows how to do a shoulder throw. Everyone knows an armbar. So when you get to the very top level, that's what matters. Before that, if you're fighting the 6-year-old, if you're fighting the 6-year-old division, the toughest little 6-year-old's going to win. So at the elite level, the mental game is the most important thing. Before you get to the elite level, strength can win. And, Henry Gracie always says, technique is greater than strength. And this is true. But you know what? Technique plus strength is greater than technique.
I like it. Very insightful. And second last question. What's one movie that you watch every time it's on TV without fail?
Movie?
Yeah.
Well, The Expendables hasn't been on TV yet. Expendables 3, but we've watched that a couple of times.
Of course.
Lord of the Rings. Me and my husband really like Lord of the Rings. All of them.
Wow, you must
come to New Zealand.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, that's a few hours put away there just to watch that. And now, final question, on the build-up to Ronda's last fight, she wrote down lots of your classic quotes on the wall to help her focus. Before we let you go, can you share a quote with the listeners to help inspire them in whatever they're doing right now?
The most important one is never, ever, 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 ever give up. No matter what it is, if you're not good at it, no one who's better than you was good at it originally. I guarantee there aren't many things I know without a doubt in life, but this is one. If you keep banging away at something, whether it's writing computer code or running or judo, if you keep at it, you will get better. The world is full of people who could have been a success if they just kept banging away at it.
I like that. It is inspiration. I like that you've humanized a lot of people that have reached success to, where they were before they started all the training, got that success. Guys, don't forget to check out Dr. AnnMaria's awesome educational games at 7generationgames.com and follow her on Twitter at Dr. AnnMaria. And it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for chatting with us.
Oh, thank you very much. And now I got to go in and teach my kids judo.
Awesome. So there you have it, guys. Ronda Rousey's mom, AnnMaria DeMars, very, very insightful guest. That pretty much concludes the segment for our guest interviews for this episode. We're going to be doing a bit of chatting at the moment. There's a lot to talk about. We're going to be talking about, of course, UFC 185, huge card, really good card, lots to talk about. But before we do, there's a very, very monumental event that happened last night. It was Saturday here in Melbourne, Australia. We had, in case you've been living under a rock, you may or may not know, the cage was previously banned here in Melbourne, Australia. We like to call Melbourne the sporting capital of, I believe, Australia, but I think we call the sporting capital of the world. And for the cage to be banned here was absolutely ridiculous. Now that ban's been lifted, which obviously paves the way for UFC 193 here in Melbourne on November 15th. But before, you had the first ever cage MMA event here in Melbourne. I believe it was the Melbourne Pavilion. And our very own Dennis Shkaradov was there at Hex Fight Series number 2. And I just want to get your thoughts on the event in general and what it was like being a part of and at the first ever, MMA cage event in Melbourne, Dennis. What was the feel like of the event in general? Were people excited? Were people going crazy because it was the first cage event in Melbourne?
Yeah, it was certainly a very special occasion, Casper, because Hex was able to really quickly get a octagon or a cage together, more of a Hex cage together. I had a chat with the guys at Hex. They actually went over and got it flown in from Sydney. It was very, very last minute. It was supposed to happen in a boxing ring originally. Wow. They really did capitalize on the moment. It was, for people sort of that don't know, there's another company called the AFC that was also going to hold an event in the Melbourne Pavilion. I believe it's going to be next weekend. They got close to having the first cage event, but Hex got in there first. It was very, very impressive. And overall, I was there with Robert Whitaker, Vic Gerchich, other guys like Travis Brown was there, Brian Ebersol. Altogether, it was, like you mentioned, Cass, it was a very, very monumental, a very big, big moment for Victorian MMA. Going into it, having the cage legalized a while back, it didn't really hit me very much that it would be a special event as much as it would be. But seeing all the fans and how much they appreciate having the cage there, the difference in the fights, how much the athletes appreciate it, the whole thing, and having an opportunity to chat to a couple of the athletes there on the night, I mean, it just meant so much to everybody. It was a very, very special moment.
Yeah, I think, obviously I wasn't there, but I've been to other MMA events here in Melbourne, Australia, and sometimes when you see these fights in a ring, it takes you back a little bit, and it makes it feel a little bit like something's missing. There's no cage. You look in America, and there's so many small, low-level promotions, but even they have cages, and you think, why can't we have that? And you feel like, the forgotten stepchildren. In terms of the fights and seeing the guys get in there in the cage, what were the fights like? I hear almost every fight was a finish.
Yeah, Hex did first and foremost, if anybody is sort of a local Victorian MMA fan or even an Australian one, definitely go down and check out Hex. This was actually their second event. They packed out the Melbourne Pavilion. I was told it was approximately 1,300 people there, which is a great number.
Wow.
People were literally unable to buy tickets. It was a great atmosphere. The fights were great. There were only two decisions. Everything else was finishes. A lot of great names. Junie Browning was supposed to be on the card, from his tough fame, but Junie couldn't make it. He was injured. They replaced Junie, with some other very exciting local fighters. There was some great appearances made. One from a man who's nicknamed Simba. He looks a lot like John Jones. He's from AK Thailand. He finished with precise John Jones standing guillotine, very similar to the one he used on Lyoto Machida. His opponent dropped to the ground, similarly to Lyoto Machida.
Wow.
The whole night was very, very impressive. Everybody who went there absolutely got their money's worth. It was a great atmosphere, and the fights turned out really, really well. A bit of controversy, Casper, in the main event, though.
Yeah, I heard. You were saying, Ben Wall, obviously from Tough Smashers and formerly the UFC, he was in there against Nick Banjo Patterson. What happened? You were there firsthand. What exactly happened? Why was it controversial?
Well, first of all, I didn't realize that Nick Banjo Patterson had as big of a following in Australian MMA as he does. I mean, everybody here that was sitting around the octagon, everybody that was walking to the fights, everybody had a Banjo t-shirt on. Everybody loves Banjo. I mean, he's been in the sport for such a long time. I think a lot of people see this guy as a true mixed martial artist that's come out of Australia. He's had 15 wins and 4 losses going into this fight. Ben Wall, obviously, coming off a couple of difficult losses in the UFC. Came into this fight looking to wrestle Banjo, not wanting to stand with him. The whole fight, he did wrestle Banjo. He held him down or held him up against the cage for a lot of it. To me, Cass, and I was sitting ringside. Again, I wasn't judging it, but I was sitting ringside. It was a clear decision win to Ben Wall. However, it did go to Nick Patterson. I'm not sure exactly if that was because the judges might have been a little bit biased. The story behind Nick is that he has been pushing to get signed to the UFC, and this fight was supposed to be the fight that was going to do it for him. I'm not sure if the UFC will sign him based on this performance, but he'll definitely be someone that I recommend the UFC does sign, just based on the fact that Australia loves him so much. I mean, having him on a prelim card, I don't think it would hurt anybody, and especially having all the Banjo fans down there would really bring an interesting perspective to the fights. Closest I could compare it to is when we watch some of the Ireland cards, and the fans love, a lot of those Irish guys that have been in MMA for a while. That's very similar to Banjo. I think he could bring a lot of value to the UFC cards. However, to me, it was a clear loss to Ben Wall.
Interesting. Well, yeah, I mean, we need guys like that, especially for cards like in Melbourne, Australia. You need to get the people, you need asses in seats, basically. When you're trying to pack out, whether it's Etihad with like 30,000 people or, Rod Laver Arena where it's like 15 or so thousand people, you need to get the people in there and get asses in seats. So I've been more than happy to see Nick Banjo Patterson in the UFC. At the same time, a loss to Ben Wall, who didn't do that well in the UFC, that puts up a few alarm bells. So if this isn't the fight that gets him signed, then hopefully he puts on another good performance, possibly a finish, and that gets him signed to the UFC. Moving on, let's talk about UFC 185. Really, really huge card. Me personally, I don't know about you, Dennis. I want to get your thoughts. This, for me, was one of the most enjoyable cards I've watched in a very, very long time. Watched it from the very beginning, the early prelims. I checked it out, and by the time the card was finished, it felt like a very long event, but I mean that in a very good way. Some events, they kind of drag out, and you're like, man, main event, just come on, let's do it, let's finish it already. By the time Matt Brown and Johnny Hendricks were coming out, I was like, wow, I don't know how, but I completely forgot about that fight. And I was like, wow, there is still so much juice left. You got this fight, you got the 2 title fights coming out. By the time Pedersen and Dos Anjos came out, I was like, wow, I feel like I've been sitting here for hours and hours and hours, and it's like when you go to a music festival and you see consistently good acts after good acts. What did you think of this, Dennis?
I absolutely agree with you, Cass. I actually had exactly the same moment for the Johnny Hendricks and Matt Brown fight, because we did watch this one separately. I was watching it with some people, and we didn't actually remember that they were going to fight. We thought that it was going to go straight to the title fight between Carla and Joanna. So it was one of those cards where they really stacked the deck. It was one of those fight cards where it was really for the fans. I mean, there were so many great matchups from the very early UFC Fight Pass prelims to the fight to the prelims just in general on Fox. It was just a stacked card. I think a lot of people have been enjoying some of these stacked cards so much. This one really flew under the radar. I mean, Joe Silva, I know he does a lot of the matchmaking for the UFC. He really deserves a pat on the back for this one. He did a really, really good job. Some great matchups. He matched up some big up-and-comers. He also got some guys that have, had some losses. He matched them up nicely. You had even guys like Joseph Duffy, who had beaten Conor McGregor down there. I mean, it was a very, very good card. And a lot of those main event matchups, they could have been main events for UFC fight nights. I mean, Alistair Overeem versus Roy Nelson, captivating matchup. 2 title fights. Johnny Hendricks versus Matt Brown. Are you kidding me? Last year, that would have been one of the best, main events that the UFC could put on for a fight night. So they put it all together, and you have to respect the UFC for doing it. If a guy goes up to me and he goes, Dennis, what do you think I should spend my $50 on? I don't want to buy just any UFC pay-per-view because I'm low on money, but if you can recommend one, what would you recommend? looking back on this card, I would definitely recommend UFC 185. It was just a pleasure to watch.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There were many, many times during that pay-per-view where I was like, man, money well spent. I buy every single pay-per-view, and it does get expensive. It gets really expensive, especially when you've got them like, back to back and $50. When you calculate that over a year, that's quite a few $100s. Honestly, more than happy to spend money on cards like this. On cards like UFC 185, I'd buy them every weekend without fail. Really, really good card. I want to run through a few of the prelim cards. Beneil Dariush against Darren Cruikshank. I personally had Darren Cruikshank. I thought he was going to win this one. This is, I believe, Darren's second loss in a row. But, man, what a coming out party for Beneil Dariush. Really, really impressive fight. Put away Darren Cruikshank really nicely with a beautiful rear naked choke. The Detroit Superstar, as we've said on Twitter, unfortunately was relegated to the Detroit Civilian. I think Kid Rock was really happy watching that fight because he gets to keep his name. But yeah, really, really impressed with Beneil Dariush. Can't wait to see what he does in the lightweight division. Just needs to work on obviously making the weight. Middleweight fight, Elias Theodorou versus Roger Narvaez. I was really keen to see what Roger can do in the middleweight division. He's a really big guy, and I think he might have the biggest reach in the middleweight division. I think he's got like a 79-inch reach. I believe that's even bigger than Chris Weidman's reach, which is 78 inches. Elias Theodorou, opening up in this fight, he came out, he looked beautiful as he always does. I was like, is he coming to a fight, or is he running the catwalk? What is he doing? We put out a tweet afterwards saying, who do you think who do you think loves themselves more, Elias Theodorou or Kanye West? Please respond. Please let us know in the comments what you think. In this fight at the start, I thought Elias looked a little bit slow. I thought, Roger looks pretty on point. If he starts to get comfortable and use his range, he's really going to take over. One thing that I will say I was very impressed with in Elias was his kicks. His kicking game's pretty good. He managed to back up Roger against the cage quite a lot. And what I really liked was when he'd back up Roger and use his jab and use his strikes. As soon as Roger would go back up, Elias would mix in a kick and add that kick as he was backing up, which obviously it's harder to reach a guy with your arms than it is with your legs. So I really appreciated that with Elias. One thing though, watching that fight, it was a nice victory. Even though Roger's pretty low on the pecking order in middleweight, I was kind of watching Elias thinking, man, he's coming up nicely, but against guys like, Rockholder Machida, he really needs to work on his speed. Much like Rafael Dos Anjos, who's become an incredibly fast striker. We'll talk about him later. I think Elias needs to do something in terms of either his strength and conditioning. He's got great cardio. I'll give him that. He needs to work on his speed and his explosive power. Just quickly on the next fight, Ross Pearson versus Sam Stout. This is a fight, man. Ross Pearson, I really like this guy. He had a tough outing in his last fight, and obviously he got pretty screwed over against Diego Sanchez. Sam Stout versus Ross Pearson, I was thinking, man, he is a possible fight of the night candidate right here. Sam Stout looked pretty decent in the first round. I feel like Ross is sometimes a slow starter. In the second, he managed to capitalize both of them through their left hooks. I believe Sam went to the body and Ross went to the face. Very, very reminiscent knockout of Dan Hardy and Carlos Condit. And also kind of the way he sort of had that, I don't know what you call it, but it was just like a high block and he ducked underneath Sam's punch. Very reminiscent also of Rampage versus Vanderlei Silva, their third fight. Beautiful, beautiful knockout from Ross Pearson. The one alarming and sort of disappointing thing is that Sam Stout's been in a lot of wars and he used to eat punches like that. He used to eat punches like that on the daily. And now he's getting knocked out by these. So considering his last fight was about almost exactly a year ago, I think it was 11 months to the day ago, it was a very brutal 30-second knockout to KJ Noons. It was at the Ultimate Fighter Nations finale, Bisping versus Kennedy. That to me feels like it was years and years and years ago. So that just goes to show how long ago that was. And that was the one where he tried to wrestle the referee. So it's not looking good for Sam Stout. His corner was saying this is the best Sam Stout we've ever seen. This is the best you've ever looked. So for him to get knocked out that quickly in the second round, he's got to be, I think, and I'm not saying he should retire or anything like that, but I think he's at the point, he's had a lot of fights, he's been in the UFC for a very long time. It's at the point where he needs to start looking at what he's going to be doing next in his career.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you, Cass. And just a couple of notes on those fights that you mentioned. With Darren Cruikshank, it's not a good year for him. He missed weight going into this fight, came in at 157.5 pounds. He was given additional time to make the limit, but he missed weight again. He was fined obviously 20% of his purse. Obviously earlier on, he had the no contest in his last fight where there was the eye pokes. He had an injury. I mean, Darren's someone who's really, really exciting. I really love watching Darren. He's got really explosive kicks. I just like to see him in his next fight, really put it all together. And the whole missing the weight thing, I mean, obviously there's a million excuses for it, but anytime someone misses weight, you just know they're not on point in their fight. And most of the time they will lose the fight when they miss weight. So hopefully Darren, fixes whatever the issue was there and we see him come out stronger. With Elias, he's only 26 years old. This is, like you mentioned, Cass, his third UFC win. It's his second finish. He's a charismatic, good-looking guy, great from a marketing and selling perspective. I really think just from a side perspective, this guy could be a huge star in the UFC. I agree with you. I don't think the UFC should rush him. Let's let him, pick up his skills while they give him better and better competition. But I think this guy could certainly be a big star for Canada in the future. And, even though he does love himself, he's also got a great sense of humor in fights. I think this is a guy that's going to keep developing himself from a fighting perspective, but also from a showman perspective. So I'm very excited to see how he does. Great stuff to Elias. And, with Sam Stout, he is a guy that's been in the UFC for ages. The first event that he was at was UFC 58, USA versus Canada. I mean, the guy's been in the UFC almost 10 years now. And of course, everybody remembers he had that rivalry with Spencer Fisher. They actually fought 3 times and he beat him twice. Probably the highlight of his career, some of the most exciting stuff there. Like you said, Casper, very alarming that he is getting knocked out so quickly. He has taken a lot of punishment. I'll be interested to see what happens in his next fight. I think if he sticks around for his next fight, that will tell a lot of stuff to us in terms of whether it's time for him to maybe hang up the gloves or whether he's got a few more left. But I know the UFC absolutely loves Sam. He's done so much for the UFC. The fans absolutely love him. But it's just sad sometimes if a guy isn't the same like he used to be and he hangs around too long. It's always something that you worry about, especially with a fan favorite like Sam Stout.
Yeah, and with Sam, it's not a case of where he's fighting some kind of new breed of fighter. He's fighting Ross Pearson, who's a great fighter, and I think he's really found his groove. But again, he's another guy who has been in the UFC for a long time, and I believe has also had wars with Spencer Fisher. Just quickly on Elias, man, I don't really pay much attention to fighters' age. I don't really care how old a fighter is. I'm always surprised when people say things like, oh, Shogun's only, 32 or 33, and Nogueira's only, this age. I think Shogun's actually older than, or young, I don't know. Anyway, with Elias, I can't believe he's only 26. That's crazy.
Yeah,
you and me, you turned 26 just recently.
Now everybody knows.
Sorry to remind you.
I was hoping they thought I was a young, fresh 19-year-old.
Yeah, a young, supple 19-year-old. I'm 25. Elias is like a year and a half on me. I hope that I can be as good looking and confident and love myself as much as Elias in the next 18 months. But no, in all seriousness, we kid Elias. He seems like a great guy. I think he's the type of guy you're either going to love him or hate him. I personally like him. I like that he's got a lot of charisma. He's an interesting guy. He's the type of guy that I look for in interviews. I like seeing what he says. And considering he used to be a model, I don't know, maybe he still is. I think he's probably a really good candidate for Reebok to really get behind him. You know what I mean? He's a good-looking guy. They recently signed Paige Van Zandt, who's only won one fight in the UFC. I think he'd be a really good spokesman. I mean, you've got a model, you've got a guy who has one of those personalities that's very transcending. He's not the type of guy where you look at him and you think, oh, he's got a very much fighter's personality. I can't really relate. No, he looks like the type of guy you'd see in a shopping mall or one of your friends' friends or something like that. So me personally, I think Reebok should definitely look at signing this guy. And considering he's a good-looking guy, he'd probably be good in the commercials as well.
Yeah, well, I can imagine him and Paige in an ad. They'd be so good looking that it might make a lot of guys out there a bit like,
it'd break the TV
I hate
screen.
myself. Yeah. Why don't I get in the gym? Why can't I do that? And just quickly, Cass, on Pearson, obviously had a disappointing performance against Alan Sydney. He looked good against Sam Stout. What do you think? Do you think he can make one more run at the title? Because I think even though he's had a few difficult losses, a couple of losses that really weren't losses, in my opinion, a couple of bad decisions, I still think he might be able to make a run for it in the future if he strings some wins together.
I think anyone can still make a run. If you look at Rafael dos Anjos and the guy that I believe Rafael came into the UFC with 2 losses in a row. And if you look at the way he's improved his skills and turned himself around, I think Ross is always going to be a threat. He's got great striking. He's got good knockout power. I don't know if I necessarily see him winning the belt. I think he may be able to become a contender again. I think winning the belt is a little bit of a stretch, but look, I'm one of those guys. I love seeing Ross Pearson. I was saying this to someone else the other day. I was like, man, this card is so stacked. You've got Ross Pearson on the freaking prelims. You know what I mean? He's a great guy to have around for things like that. You know, main eventing prelims, or even coming to like an Australia card or a Sydney card, or you know, even a UK card. We know the UFC's a little bit lenient with UK fighters, especially if they're excited, because they always want to tap into that UK market. So I don't see Ross Pearson obviously going anywhere, even if he loses, say, the next 2 fights. I'm always keen to see him, and he could very well become a contender in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like Ross, when we used to see him in the octagon before, he kind of had this spell of dodgy losses and some losses. I always feel like it seemed like he improved lots every time you saw him in the octagon. And then there was a period there where you sort of saw a very similar Ross Pearson. So I'm hoping he does go back to the drawing board and he keeps improving. So in the next fight, he makes another statement. I think it could definitely give him a great opportunity to, make a run for being a contender in the future. You know, I know he lives here in the Gold Coast. I believe he lives in Australia. He's got a wonderful girlfriend or wife here in the country. But I hope he is taking his training all around and going around to different camps, because we have some great trainers here, some amazing camps. But, you know, it'd be great to see him really improve a lot of his skills, so we see a better and improved Ross Pearson every time, and he doesn't become stagnant, because I guess that's the biggest issue for a lot of the MMA guys in the UFC.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Let's talk about the main card, the flyweights. Henri Cejudo against Chris Carriaso. Chris Carriaso obviously fought for the title not too long ago. This fight pretty much went exactly how I thought it would. Henri Cejudo obviously made a successful debut at flyweight. You know, he wasn't a big guy, and he had a lot of issues with making weight in the past. But I knew that if he was going to make the weight, he was going to absolutely steamroll Chris Carriaso. An amazing wrestler. And not only that, but this guy has great knockout power, great power in his hands. I believe, honestly, he will be fighting for the title very soon. What did you think of this fight, Dennis?
Yeah, I agree with you. This is exactly what I expected from Henry. He's, you know, such a decorated wrestler, such a strong guy. And again, I agree with you. He should fight for the title next. Look, the thing, or very, very soon, the thing with Demetrius Johnson is there's just not many guys that can really give him an issue. I mean, he's got a great competitor coming up in his next title fight, but if he goes through that fight as dominantly as he has with his previous fights, I think Henry is a great candidate, because this is a guy who's possibly one of the best wrestlers in MMA, or in the flyweight division at least. I mean, his pedigree is just absolutely unbelievable. So what could he do against Demetrius Johnson? I mean, that's going to be something people are going to want to pay money for. And with a guy like Demetrius Johnson, who it's divided. There's a lot of people out there that love watching Demetrius Johnson fight. I'm one of them. But there's also a lot of people out there that just expect Demetrius to dominate the whole fight, possibly not really get a finish, but be very, very dominant. And that doesn't really get him very excited for the fight. They don't see a lot of his competitors as having a chance, because Demetrius Johnson is just so far ahead of most guys in the flyweight division. So what could Henry do against Demetrius Johnson? I think it's a question that a lot of people would be willing to pay money for.
Yeah, well, I mean, like you said, Henry obviously comes in with his great wrestling pedigree, and he is what the flyweight division needs. People looking at the flyweight division and thinking, you know, who is Demetrius Johnson going to face next? You had John Lineker, who looked good against Ian McCall, but now he's been kicked off back up to bantamweight, which, you know, is his natural weight class. I know a lot of these guys say that they'll take another, like Kelvin Gastelum, for example. He's another guy that got booted up to middleweight. He said he's going to take a fight at middleweight, and then he's going to come back down to welterweight. Who knows if John Lineker will do the same? But if he doesn't, then there's not really many guys. You've got Ian McCall. He's another guy that you could have another rematch with, but again, he just lost. Henri Cejudo, he brings a real threat. He's got amazing wrestling. Demetrius Johnson is a really, really well-rounded, you know, people go on and on about how technically great he is. Well, Henri Cejudo's got fantastic wrestling, arguably better than Demetrius Johnson. Obviously, MMA wrestling and wrestling are two different things, and he's got power and strike. So obviously he's got, in my opinion, better grappling than Ali Bagotinov, and he presents a real threat. So I'm really excited to see this guy, you know, move up the ranks, and I think he may be fighting Demetrius Johnson with another 1 or 2 wins.
Yeah, and you know, Lineker actually said that he's happy being a bantamweight, and he still has to cut about 30 pounds to get down to it. So I don't think we'll be seeing him in flyweight anytime soon, and that's probably a good thing for Lineker.
Let's talk about the next fight. Alistair Overeem versus Roy Nelson. See, this is another fight that by the time it rolled around, I was
Huge.
I was like, oh, wow.
Massive,
There was already so many good fights that I was really enjoying
Yeah.
the card. I'm like, oh, wow, now Alistair Overeem and Roy Nelson. This was a really big test for Alistair Overeem. I spoke to a few people recently, and I saw some of the critics, and they're all picking Roy Nelson. They were saying he's got so much power and he's got so much time to land that, overhand right. I don't think so. I think we're going to see a very measured, calculated Alistair Overeem. He looked good against Struve. And you saw those flashes of the Greg Jackson camp in his fight against Rothwell before he got knocked out. I thought this is going to be the Alistair Overeem that's really going to settle into, his role at Jackson's and his trainers, and he's going to come in very confident. And it's pretty much what we saw. I was very, very impressed with Alistair Overeem in this fight. He looked like he was pacing himself. He looked calm. He looked like it wasn't a case where he was just standing there and looked afraid of Roy Nelson. He was pacing himself, but he was still a sniper. When he attacked, when he threw those knees and those kicks, he looked completely vicious. I can't remember whether it was the first or the second round, but it didn't take very long for Alistair Overeem to drop Roy Nelson with a leg kick. To me, vintage Alistair Overeem. We saw uber knees. We saw uber kicks to the legs. We saw strong punches. I saw, very fast punches from Alistair Overeem. He was constantly getting out of the way. And I know the Dallas, Texas crowd were really harsh on Alistair Overeem when he was running away from Roy Nelson. But it's not like he was pulling a Caleb stance. I think he did absolutely the right thing. When you look at Alistair Overeem, and we spoke to Henri Hooft, and he was saying how, man, this guy was supposed to be champion, 2-3 years ago. It's absolutely right. He's fallen very far down the ladder, and he's all about rebuilding himself. He could not afford another loss. He's been sort of switching between losses and wins recently. He finally got a really nice, impressive knockout over Stefan Struve. Granted that it was on the ground, he really needed this win, and I didn't have any issue with him running out of the way, running away from Roy Nelson. It's not like he ran around the whole octagon. It was very periodically, and it was only when he was in danger. And in my opinion, a knockout loss for Overeem due to his ego would have been the absolute dumbest thing. We've seen him lose fights that, in my opinion, he should have won. I think he should have beaten Bigfoot Silva, and I think he would beat him in a rematch. And then there was the fight against Travis Brown, where I think he gassed himself much like Shane Carwin. But both of those fights, I think he should have won. And here against Roy Nelson, it was very much all or nothing. So I was extremely, extremely impressed with Alistair Overeem. Dennis, what did you think of the fight?
Yeah, you covered Overeem very, very well. And the Travis Brown loss, the Bigfoot Silva loss, it was difficult for a lot of people to watch because Overeem was dominating and then he got overconfident and got caught. And for a lot of people, it was bittersweet because he was acting a bit too cocky in those fights. I feel like we see a different Alistair Overeem now. He's actually listening to his coaches and he's taking strategy into his fights. And now people are realizing, hey, he is actually a dangerous fighter. He's someone with really, really good takedown defense. So if he fought a guy like Cain Velasquez, for example, you never know. Maybe Cain couldn't take him down. Also, he's great on the ground himself. He has great submissions. And it really looks like he's putting together a different sort of game plan, a different kind of style for himself. He's moving around a lot quicker. He was quite light going into this one, Cass. I believe he was 247, which is very, very impressive. So now he looked really, really good. And a lot of people will say, look, Overeem has had a bit of a rough run. He's had quite a few knockouts. And I'm just going to read out his record. After beating Brock Lesnar, he lost to Bigfoot Silva, like you said, Travis Brown, then he beat Frank Mir, then he lost to Ben Rothwell. And now he's won against Stefan Struve and Roy Nelson. Now I just want to go over to Roy Nelson. Roy Nelson, fan favorite, great guy. What people don't realize is since he beat Cheick Kongo, which was at UFC 159, April 27, 2013, he lost to Stipe Miocic, all right? Stipe outworked him with the feet. He lost to Daniel Cormier. Then he won against Antonio, Rodrigo Nogueira. Then he lost against Mark Hunt, and now he loses against Alistair Overeem. Before this, he actually won a fight with Dave Herman, Matt Mitrione, and Cheick Kongo back-to-back. And before that, he lost to Fabricio Verdum. The reason why I'm bringing this up is, Roy Nelson is a guy who's a fan favorite. Everybody loves Roy. He's a very interesting guy. What I'm bringing up his record is because he's 38 years old, and he's actually been on the losing side quite a lot recently. You think about Alistair Overeem, and obviously he's been knocked out, so his losses have been more devastating. But Roy Nelson, this is, if you think about it, fourth loss in a row. Sure, he beat Big Nogueira, But apart from that, he's been on a bit of a losing streak. And when I saw Roy fight Alistair, I thought that he obviously a tough guy, can take any punch, those kicks to his stomach, those welts and the bruises across his leg and his stomach and his body. I mean, who could really take that? I don't think I know many people that could take that. I've been in the ring with people quarter size of over him, and they've kicked me and I've gone down. I don't know what it takes to have heart like Roy Nelson has. My problem with Roy is he just doesn't improve fight by fight, and he just relies on that overhand punch, on that overhand right. That's his game plan. It's obvious. And the reason why Alistair Overeem was able to pick him apart was it was just too one-dimensional. I mean, Roy Nelson, he actually had a couple of good moments against Overeem. He landed some good punches. There was that one punch that Overeem moved into. He knocked Overeem down at one point. So you can't say that Roy Nelson isn't good at what he does. He's great at what he does. But what I'm afraid of is he's becoming a bit of a Dan Henderson, where he just comes out and relies on the success of that overhand. I'd like to see Roy Nelson advance his game. I know he's 38 years old. He's set in his ways, but I'd like to see him become better because, I mean, Cass, whoever he fights next, I'm not sure who they're going to put him up against, but this could be his third loss in a row and a loss in a long string of losses. So after this fight, now I'm worried about Roy Nelson because I like Roy Nelson. I like watching Roy Nelson, but I want to see something new from Roy. And again, the whole thing comes around to he is a big guy. He doesn't probably follow a great diet. Does he need to take these things more seriously? Because when I watch Roy Nelson, I think, man, this guy could be spectacular if he lost the weight. Maybe if he was, in the right weight class. He's a bit small for a lot of the other heavyweights. I mean, against Overeem, he looked pretty small. But the other thing I want to see from him is improvement, new techniques, new areas where he can use against fighters who are expecting that overhand. So I'm worried about Roy Nelson and the fact that how many more fights does he have left? Because if guys come in and expect Roy to do the same thing every time, and I'm talking about a lot of the top tier guys, I mean, he's going to keep losing. And I want to see Roy win. I want to see Roy have a few more great fights in the UFC. So that's my kind of worry about the fight.
Yeah, and as I was watching that fight, I agree with you, Dennis, and as I was watching that fight, I was like, man, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Roy Nelson, but I'll tell you what, I would not want to be Roy Nelson because he has taken punishment from some of the hardest hitters and strongest guys in heavyweight. And yeah, like, it's a very interesting point. He has technically lost 2 in a row, or officially he's lost 2 in a row, but then that Nogueira matchup, I mean, to me, that was a win on, handed to him on a silver platter, and that's not taking anything away from Nogueira. I just think that he's not necessarily his skills, but physically Nogueira's declined a lot. I think the good thing about Roy Nelson is he's still a good draw, and he's basically a good gatekeeper in the heavyweight division. He can still beat a lot of the mid to low level guys. With Alistair Overeem, I guess that's the other thing. People did say that he was going to be a champion for a reason, and in that sense, there's really no shame in losing to Alistair Overeem. He did put together a really nice, I wouldn't call it a combination. He faked with the overhand right, he moved in, and then he actually tagged Overeem with the left. I think it was an overhand left. I was very impressed with that. I like that he switched it up nicely like that. I just have a few things that I want to say about Overeem. I was very impressed with his performance, but there was still a few things that worry me about Alistair Overeem. One is people have often... first of all, it's his cardio. He did look like he was taking deep breaths by round 2, and to me, it always felt like, ooh, can he get away with the whole fight without getting tagged and without, getting knocked down? And in the very end of the last round, we saw that he did get tagged, and I think the pressure got to him because I think I had the same thing going through my mind as what Alistair Overeem had. I saw the clock. It was 30 seconds left, and I was like, ooh, 30 seconds. Can he get away with it? Can he avoid getting hit? And you saw Roy Nelson closed in on him, and he did get hit. And then even when those other times where he avoided Roy Nelson, I don't have a problem with that, with Alistair running away. It was very smart in this fight, but at the same time, if you do that against a guy like Cain Velasquez, you are going to get punished. You are going to get destroyed. Same, against a guy like Stipe Miocic. You can't run away from guys like that because there are other guys in the heavyweight division. They won't give you that space. They won't give you that leeway. A guy like Roy Nelson, who, he's not the tallest, he's not the rangiest heavyweight you can do that against. But against other guys, you won't be able to do that. And I think in that last 30 seconds, the pressure may have gotten to Alistair a little bit, and that's one of the reasons why he got tagged. The other thing is, obviously we talked about cardio. I don't see Alistair being in a main event for quite a while. I think honestly, Alistair Overeem, if the UFC's smart, they're going to put him in 3-round fights. I don't think it's wise to put him in 5-round fights because he may end up winning the first 3 rounds and then get, for whatever reason, he might slip up and lose in the 4th and the 5th. That's my point. So I still think, even though he looked good... Oh, and here's the other thing. A lot of people have often said, much like with Vitor Belfort, when things are going well for Overeem, he looks great. But when he's under pressure, he sometimes fades. So that's the other thing I just want to note about this fight. He looked really good, and, he took that punch against Roy Nelson, really good. He didn't seem phased. But in that last round, I think the pressure got to him a little bit. So I'm very curious to see what happens in the future. And this is my prediction. I don't think we're going to see Alistair Overeem in any 5-rounders anytime soon, unless it's for a title.
Yeah, that would be really smart for UFC to do that. And if I'm Greg Jackson, I'm going to take Alistair Overeem, back to the video room, and I'm going to replay the parts of the fight where Roy has him backed up against the cage, and he just sort of puts his arms up, is hoping to block the punches. That kind of stuff obviously isn't going to fly against the top guys. So I guess they just have to keep working with Alistair about being in those high-pressure situations and those losing situations and really sort of practicing over and over techniques for him to get out of those situations or deal with those situations. But nevertheless, Cass, like you mentioned, Alistair Overeem taking steps in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the next fight. Speaking of guys taking right steps in the right direction, you got Johnny Hendricks versus Matt Brown. I don't know if anyone saw Johnny Hendricks' truck or tank, or I don't know what you want to call it. It was a cross between a tank and a ship that the UFC embedded. It's really big. It's black. I think you can fit like 4 dogs in the back. You can tow a truck. You can, I think you can fit like 60 barbecues in there as well. It looks like the Batmobile, and I think Johnny Hendricks may actually be Batman, believe it or not. But we saw a really shredded Johnny Hendricks come in. I believe he wasn't even trained with Mike Dolce for this one, and he put on a really, really good performance against Matt Brown. What did you think of the fight, Dennis?
Yeah, even before I talk about the fight, I just want to say, I think the thing that he learned most is no matter how good of a guy you have in your corner like Dolce, because he's great at getting guys to cut the weight, you can't just eat whatever you want before you start training and cutting weight. And I think there was a part there where he was injured and he was eating maybe a lot of junk food. I know he loves his food. And there were some photos out there, and, with all due respect, he was a little bit fat in those photos, and people spoke about it, and it was sort of the running joke. I think going into this one, he really embraced the fact that I need to be eating healthy 100% of the time, and not just when I'm getting into fight shape, just generally in life. I have to eat healthy. If I want to perform at the best of my ability, I have to eat healthy. And I was very, very impressed with the way that he looked and his conditioning and the way he moved around. Yeah, the fight itself, I thought Matt Brown did a really, really good job with the striking. Matt looked really, really good. He had a lot of great combinations, just brutal in that clinch, lots of great elbows, lots of great knees, lots of great kicks. His Muay Thai looks on point. Unfortunately, his takedown defense just wasn't there. It wasn't up to the level that it needed to be against a guy like Johnny Hendricks. I mean, Hendricks looked great in terms of his striking. He did a little bit of striking. He looked good there as well. But I think he just really wanted to dominate Matt Brown, and he just wanted to show that he's still one of the top guys in the division, and he didn't want to let the opportunity to fight for the title slip out of his hands. So I feel like he did take a bit of a safe route there in certain parts of the fight. But at the same time, that kind of domination, I mean, even if you dominate a guy like that in the wrestling department, a guy like Matt Brown, it's still big ups to you. Even though it might not be the most exciting fight at all times, it's still extremely difficult at that level in the UFC to do that to somebody. So, nevertheless, impressive from Johnny Hendricks. What did you think, Cass?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that I was impressed by with Johnny Hendricks is the way he out-wrestled Matt Brown. I mean, everybody knows that Johnny Hendricks is obviously a phenomenal wrestler, but I also think Matt Brown has some of the most underrated wrestling in the welterweight division. So for him to just pick him up at will and slam him and dunk him and just the way he controlled him on the ground, I was very impressed. And I was also very impressed with Johnny about how harsh he was on himself after the fight and saying how disappointed he was in his fight and this and that and how he needs to go back to the drawing board. I mean, that's the kind of mentality that you need to have if you want to be a champion. Now, I'll tell you this, mark my words, if Robbie Lawler beats Rory McDonald for that title, Johnny Hendricks and Robbie Lawler will fight again. I mean, I'm losing count of how many times they've fought now, but and I think he's coming for Robbie Lawler. That last fight was really, really close. A lot of people thought that Johnny Hendricks won that fight, and if he keeps improving, I mean, we already saw in that last fight how good his striking looked, that improved Muay Thai, those kicks. It's one thing to have a wrestler who has big knockout power. It's another thing to have a wrestler who has knockout power and has really good striking. But then what you're seeing in Johnny Hendricks is a really, really good wrestler with heaps of knockout power, good boxing, and now we're seeing, you know, a lot of kicks added to his game. And, you know, if everything else fails, he can always go back to that wrestling. So I'm very impressed with Johnny Hendricks and really impressed with his attitude post-fight. I really can't wait to see, you know, what kind of improvements Johnny Hendricks will make in his next fight.
Yeah, and just a couple of points as well. With Matt Brown, I don't think it was a bad fight for him. I think he looked really, really good on the feet. I mean, his striking looked really, really great. It's just something where he's going to have to go back now and work on his wrestling defense. I think it's going to be one of those wake-up calls that a lot of the elite guys in the UFC have when they have a fight like this. There's an area in their game they just need to focus on a little bit more, and that's going to be the area that he focuses on. And I know he's one of those guys, even though he's got great jiu-jitsu and great wrestling, he prefers to strike, and maybe he just focused on that area a bit too much going into this fight. Or nevertheless, you know, Johnny Hendricks, just an amazing wrestler. The other thing I was going to say, Cass, if the title fight does happen between Rory McDonald and Robbie Lawler, and McDonald wins, I'd love to see him fight Johnny Hendricks as well. That's going to be a matchup that's going to be very, very interesting to me. I mean, both guys great wrestlers, some great striking there. So both outcomes, the UFC have a hit run in my opinion. Whether it's going to be a rematch here or a new matchup here, both matchups are great in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see these guys, like, you know, the top guys in the welterweight division. You know, these are not the guys that were at the top, you know, say 3 years ago. So it's a really interesting time for the welterweight division. One more point that I was going to say, I'm trying to remember what it was. Oh, yeah, Matt Brown, not too long ago, he was saying how he could out-wrestle GSP, and he's training with, you know, amazing wrestlers and things like that, possibly Olympic guys, I don't remember. But to me, this answers the question a little bit on Matt Brown's, you know, wrestling. I think it's very, very good, but Johnny Hendricks, it wasn't like he, you know, had to work for takedowns. He absolutely demolished him in the wrestling department. But, you know, still, tons and tons of respect to Matt Brown. I want to talk about this next fight, the women's strawweight title fight. Joanna Jędrzejczyk against Carla Esparza. Take that, Mike Goldberg. And let me just say, throughout the whole fight, Jesus, I was cringing. I know I'm Polish, and of course I can say her name, and for anyone else, I understand it's very hard, but Jesus, Mike Goldberg just made an absolute mockery. He was like, Jędrzejczyk. I was like, is it Japanese? What are you doing, Mike Goldberg? I heard Bruce Buffer. I don't think Bruce Buffer has any Polish in him. Did a pretty damn good job. And you saw MMA Junkie put out that video about, you know, people not being able to pronounce their name. It was hilarious. But, oh, man, I like Mike Goldberg. But, Jesus, he needs to, I don't know, do a training camp with, like, Polish people on, like, you know, linguistics or something. But anyway, what did you think of this fight, Dennis?
Well, I thought Carla Esparza was going to go through her.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be a one-sided fight.
Yeah.
I liked what's the see, I don't want to say it the wrong way now after you said this thing about Mike. What's the proper way to pronounce her first name? Is it Joanna, or how did you pronounce it?
Oh, man, it's so simple. It's just Joanna Jędrzejczyk.
Okay, Joanna. There we go. So
Joanna, yeah.
Joanna, I can connect with Joanna because I was watching the countdown about her and her family, and she lives in this one-bedroom apartment or this apartment with her whole family. It's like her boyfriend's there, her brother's there. It's the whole thing, and it's something that European people actually do. It's a normal thing. When I was born over in Ukraine, which is where I'm originally from, that's the kind of living situation I had. Over in Poland, and, you know, me and Cass, we can tell you guys stories about this for days. The economy and the lifestyle, it's very, very different. And Joanna just looked like a rabid dog going into that cage. Like, she was going to win that, and there's just no way around it. She was either going to win it or die trying. That's what she looked like going in there. She just looked so focused. When it came to Carla, I don't know what it was. I was looking at her before the fight, and it just looked like she didn't want to be there. I don't know if there was something going on in her personal life or she was just feeling flat on the day, but she just didn't look like she really wanted to be there. And when the fight started, I mean, geez Louise, it was just Carla just did not look good at all. I mean, her striking, she was going up against a 6-time world champion in Muay Thai, I believe, Casper, and Joanna. I mean, her striking, she just looked like an average Joe in the gym who just took up striking versus a professional. Her striking just did not look there. And I mean, the fact that she couldn't get Joanna down, those shots, they weren't timed well at all. She didn't mix them in with the strikes. If she waited for Joanna to throw those lead jabs or hooks and try to get underneath there and try and take her down, that's one thing. But she was just shooting and shooting and shooting the same result every time. Joanna worked her takedown defense perfectly, put her in that difficult position that everybody who's ever wrestled or have done jiu-jitsu hates being in, where your face is smashed across the ground and there's that awful overhook that's hurting your shoulder. And Carla just kept being put in that position over and over. She got Joanna down once, couldn't really do much with it. And after that, I think it took all her confidence away. And she was just... to me personally, it looked like she was just sort of standing there waiting for that fight to be stopped. She had nothing to offer Joanna. Joanna looked like an animal. And here's the other thing I'm going to say, and it's going to be a little controversial. I don't know if people are going to agree with me or not, but when I look at Ronda Rousey and I look at Joanna's the person that I would not want to get in the cage with. And it goes back to what I said a few weeks ago. Ronda Rousey, she's an animal. She'll hit you. She's had some good TKO victories, but her thing is she's going to grapple you, put you down, and put you in a brutal armbar. But Joanna, she's going to beat your head in, and that's scary, man. That's more Mike Tyson to me than anyone else. If I'm in that division, oh man, I'm gonna make sure that I'm ready to fight Joanna, because to me, she's just on another level when it comes to striking. But Cass, that's enough of my rant. What did you think of this whole fight?
That's interesting. You know, if I had to compare either one of them to Mike Tyson, I'd probably say Ronda Rousey is closer in you know what she's accomplished. If I had to get in the cage with either one of them or both of them, I'd probably make sure to bring cookies and hope that, like most women, chocolate is their weakness. But in all honesty, I'll start from the beginning on my thoughts. You know, watching the countdown and all the embeddeds and stuff like that. To me, Joanna reminds me of exactly what most Polish girls are like. In fact, my aunt, who's only a few years, like, there's my mum and there's my auntie, and my auntie's like half my mum's age, and you know we always got along really well. She reminds me of my auntie. So seeing the way she was in the embeddeds, it seemed to me like she was the star in embeddeds, and I saw a lot of people on the forums, on Sherdog and MMA Underground and stuff like that. They were talking a lot about Joanna. She got a lot of attention. You know, even, like I said, MMA Junkie putting out that video on how to pronounce her name. To me, she's probably one of the most marketable, foreign fighters there is, especially in the strawweight division. But in general, you know, you've got people like, say, Paige Van Zandt and all these stars that are coming out of nowhere, and obviously Conor McGregor. And I'm not comparing her to those kind of people just yet, but to me, she's a huge star. Like, you see her in her weigh-ins. She does these crazy weigh-ins. And, for a Polish person, her English is actually really good. She's got the heavy accent, but she speaks well. She's always smiling, very happy. And I think her smile is another big thing that sort of gets her, for people to sort of relate to her. Now, going to this fight, I actually thought she was going to lose. Despite being a Pole, in my unbiased opinion, I thought Carla was going to out-wrestle her. I thought it was going to be similar to, Rose against Carla. I just thought, Carla, with all that experience, she's faced girls like, not like this, not with that kind of striking pedigree, but I just thought Carla's wrestling is too good. Man, when they got in the cage, it was a complete different story. She did threaten with those takedowns, and early on, I thought, wow, Carla's, really relentless, really sticking to her. And, you saw Joanna being very, very confident in, that her wrestling won't be a factor, Carla's wrestling won't be a factor. And I kind of thought, maybe it's like a lot of times where, Matt Brown, for example, was like, yep, I'm going to beat Johnny Hendricks, I'm going to stand there, I'm going to strike with him. And of course, he got out-wrestled. And it happens so often where people are so, confident in their anti-wrestling, and then it just all goes out the window once the fight starts. And to me, that was the first, 30 seconds or minute. But after that first takedown Carla got, it was pretty much all Joanna, with the takedown defense. And very, very early on in that fight, Carla started to look really, really desperate. And by the end of the first round, Carla, this is the woman who won, the Ultimate Fighter for strawweights, who was the previous Invicta champion, just looked like she was outclassed. She was getting absolutely destroyed. And to me, like, obviously, I wouldn't want the fight stopped early, but there were points in that fight where I was like, man, at the moment they're not even engaging, but like you could just stop this fight, not really, but you know what I'm saying? Like you could just stop this fight because it looks like Carla is just going to get beaten any second now. It looked like a ticking clock, and I can tell you now, I didn't expect that to happen. So really, really happy that Joanna put on this amazing performance. I'm happy for her that she obviously, fulfilled her dream of becoming a champion. I think most fighters go through this, but I know especially like in the Eastern Bloc, parts like Russia and Europe and things like that. Like you mentioned, Dennis, the economy is shithouse, and a lot of those countries like Poland used to be part of the the Soviet Union and all that kind of stuff. So for people like that coming through, and I'm sure Brazilians can relate to this as well, but for her to become the champion, not only that, the first ever Polish champion in the UFC. I mean, who would have thought that it was going to be one of the female strawweights? And I'm glad, and I hope that she becomes, a lot more famous, so that she can be the most famous Polish mixed martial artist, as opposed to, Mariusz Pudzianowski.
Yeah, exactly right. And here's the thing with Carla. She's an absolute legend. The stuff that she's done in the female strawweight division worldwide is absolutely fantastic. She hasn't lost since 2011, but everybody has a crappy performance. This was a terrible performance from Carla. She knew it after the fight as well. She said that she didn't really mix in her takedowns. So, I mean, once in a while, a person like Carla, a girl like Carla needs a wake-up call, and this is going to be her wake-up call to really focus in on her striking, because she has won a lot of her fights through wrestling, and sometimes it's just not enough. And it's a division that's going to keep getting better and better, and you need to advance all skills. So I'm interested to see what Carla's going to do now when she goes back to the drawing board. Obviously, she's got a great camp, and we'll see what happens next. But Joanna, she looked great. She's got this great long reach. I'm really excited to see who she fights next. And I agree with you, Cass. She's a very marketable champion, especially now that they're going into Poland and Europe. She can be the face of the UFC there. And a lot of Europeans, they can relate to her. She's sort of an underdog, every woman kind of champion, and I'm very excited to see what happens next. But nevertheless, the strawweight division, even though it is a bit thin, it just got a whole lot more exciting for me.
Well, I think it's a really exciting division. I will just say, though, it doesn't look good for the Ultimate Fighter, because you've got... they made this big deal about the Ultimate Fighter and the first, all women's season for strawweights, and then you've got Joanna, who just comes in and absolutely destroys the winner. Not only destroys her, but she made her look like she didn't even belong. We all know Carla's got fantastic wrestling, but she just made her striking look so bad. And I understand she's a 6-time, world Muay Thai champion, but I want to get your thoughts on this, guys. Let us know in the comments below if you're on YouTube, or tweet us at SubmissionAUS on Twitter. Do you think this makes the whole strawweight division look bad, that a girl like this has just come and destroyed the previous champion, the girl who was the champion in Invicta, or is this lightning in a bottle, and they've just found Joanna, and she's that good that she's destroyed Carla, who was obviously the best previously? I'm very curious what you guys think about this. And another point, we talked about being marketable, and obviously Carla wasn't too pleased that... I don't think she has anything against Paige Van Zandt, but I think she was a bit disappointed that they picked Paige Van Zandt to become officially, part of Team Reebok, and yet Carla is a champion, and they didn't pick her. Well, now, and, recently the UFC and Reebok, I believe, mentioned, hey, look, we're really going to get behind you, we're going to promote you and this and that. Well, now, I think that's gone out the window a little bit, and all that promoting is going to be transferred over to Joanna. So I'm really happy for her. And yeah, man, I can't wait to see what happens next. I mean, you've got your first UFC in Poland, which to me is really exciting, again, being Polish. But now you can have a pay-per-view, because obviously Joanna can headline in Poland, and obviously you can look to do stadium shows and things like that in Poland. So really, really exciting. And I love the strawweight division, the women's strawweight division. So very curious what happens next.
Yeah. Now you go from that situation to the next title fight, and look, that title fight was great. It was very, very exciting. And then you think, wait a minute, there's still another fight left on the card. And who is it? Rafael Dos Anjos versus Anthony Pettis, Showtime Pettis. I mean, going into this fight, Anthony Pettis, everybody thought, still thinks this guy is a superstar. RDA has done great things. He's a very consistent fighter, won a lot of great fights. Recently, with his win over Benson Henderson, has looked like he has become more of a finisher, but I don't think many people expected him to do what he did to Anthony Pettis. Going into this fight, Cass, who did you think was going to win?
Man, I thought Anthony Pettis for sure. I did not expect, with all due respect to Rafael Dos Anjos, I just thought he was one of the, like Ali Bagutinov, who looked really good and he looked impressive, and then of course in the end it just wasn't anything for Demetrius Johnson. I just thought that Anthony Pettis was going to win, and it was going to be a case of RDA looking very improved but falling short. I definitely didn't see this happening. What did you think, Dennis?
Absolutely right. I thought Anthony Pettis is going to go through him. I had a conversation with a whole bunch of people where I said I just can't see a way for RDA to win. I mean, Anthony Pettis, he's a guy who's so strong in every area of the game. I was watching the countdown and I saw, Rafael with his family talking about how he's the only one who supports them. And then I had a look at Anthony Pettis's countdown where he discussed how and I'm not sure if this is true, Cass. Maybe I misunderstood this. And I hope you watched the same countdown, or maybe embedded it was. But I think he mentioned that he got like three haircuts a week or something.
Anthony
Gets his
Pettis,
hairline.
yeah.
I thought, wow. First of all, this guy must either have hair growing back really quickly, or he just likes to have different lines in his hair every time. But then I also thought, here's this guy. And again, I didn't think that RDA was going to win, but I thought, here's this guy that's saying, I'm the only provider for my family. I have to win this fight. I am going to win this fight. And then you have another guy who's sort of enjoying his fame and getting 3 haircuts a week. And I'm not saying Anthony Pettis isn't enjoying it. He bought a house for his mom and a car for his mom. He's a great guy and he's been through a lot of adversity. But RDA just looked like somebody that, and again, he looked exactly like Joanna. He had to win that fight. There was no chance that he could lose the fight. And going into the fight, again, he looked like a rabid dog that just wasn't going to give up until he won. I mean, I was absolutely impressed with him. I didn't realize he was capable of looking the way that he looked today. If anybody ever says that MMA is predictable, they're lying through their teeth. Yeah. Not even the biggest experts, the biggest guys with the stats could predict how a fight turns out. I mean, it's the most, and I would go out on a limb to say, apart from professional paper, scissors, rocks, it is the most unpredictable sport out there. I mean, have a look at this card. Have a look at these title fights. Both underdogs end up winning, and both of them look absolutely amazing. It just happens where you expect something from one fighter, and then he fights or she fights, and they just look completely different. And that's exactly what RDA looked like. Cass, what did you think of the fight?
Yeah, and just, in terms of betting, I'll tell you what, we've said it more and more recently. This is exactly why I don't bet and I don't waste my money on betting anymore, because it is too predictable. RDA, when I watched the countdown as well and I saw him with his family and things like that, he reminds me of, when Fedor will talk about how he needs to win for his family and how any opponent he faces is basically trying to steal from his family and, knock him back down and things like that. That's what I saw in RDA. Just so much pressure on Pettis. And yeah, like you said, rabid dog. That's probably the best way I could explain it. Those kicks to the body. It was like, when you see Muay Thai guys training, Muay Thai, and they're just like kicking those pads, like with those kicks, like bam, 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 bam. And of course, you never see that in any kind of MMA fights, but that's almost what it was like, just continuous kicks to the body. And then when you're expecting another kick to the body, boom, a kick to the leg, and the striking. He looked phenomenal, and I think it's interesting because a lot of his momentum, like he beat Jason High, but a lot of his momentum came from that Benson Henderson knockout. And I think at that point, a lot of people sort of thought, it was an early stoppage, I don't know. And I know a lot of people were definitely picking Benson Henderson. Then you had the Nate Diaz fight, and a lot of people were surprised, and obviously Nate Diaz put in a really poor performance. And, we spoke to Richard Perez, and he was saying that, Nate Diaz was injured, and he was only fighting at about 30% capacity. So there was a lot of things. If you were a betting man, there's a lot of reasons to doubt Rafael dos Anjos. Not to mention, like I said, he entered the UFC with 2 straight losses to Jeremy Stevens and Tyson Griffin. There's so many new guys coming to the UFC every year, every event, and not all of them are going to be a champion. Not all of them are going to be the prospect to win the title or even become a contender. A lot of these guys just fight a few fights and then they're booted out of the UFC again. But man, I'll tell you what, I don't know if there's ever been a fighter who's made a bigger turnaround from his debut to winning the title. You could say Chael Sonnen, because obviously he came in as an absolute nobody and got triangled by a bunch of guys and had some, really bad losses, but even he didn't win the title. So with Rafael dos Anjos, just what an improvement, just night and day. You heard during the fight they were talking about the strength and conditioning coach was saying how he was so, not loose, what's the opposite of loose? He was so tight, he had no flexibility and is fighting at about 30%. And I love how everyone is so content on, giving percentages on, this fighter used to fight at this percentage. Johnny Hendricks is fighting at 70%, 30%, 45%, 69.8%. But with Rafael dos Anjos, just talking about the fight itself, he put so much pressure on Anthony Pettis. And the thing is about Anthony Pettis is he's such a great striker, but I would say that his kicking game is a lot better than his boxing game. So if you don't give him any space to throw those kicks and get that momentum, even though he's incredibly flexible and even though he doesn't, even though you can't really tell when he's going to throw a kick, he still needs that distance. And Rafael dos Anjos basically took over the reins of what Gilbert Melendez started in the previous fight and just gave him absolutely zero room to move. And then stylistically, you look at it and it's like, Rafael dos Anjos was beating Anthony Pettis where Anthony Pettis had the advantage. Then they go to the ground, and yeah, Anthony Pettis has a phenomenal, BJJ game, and he's so good off his back. He submitted Benson Henderson, who's so hard to submit, but then on the ground, you are now officially entering Rafael dos Anjos' world. That's where this guy actually has the advantage. So it was a scary performance to see just how much he dominated Anthony Pettis. And I think Pettis was bleeding from like the second round. It was just an absolutely amazing performance. I couldn't be happier for this guy.
Yeah, RDA, always the prom date, never the prom queen. I mean, this guy started MMA in 2004 and actually debuted, like you said, in the UFC at UFC 91 in 2008. And now, all these years later, he becomes the champion. I mean, it's just unbelievable how these guys can improve. And it was one of those fights for me, Cass, where this is actually so far the front runner of Fight of the Year for me for 2015 so far. It was, sometimes people say, oh, grappling's boring, blah, blah, blah. But when RDA put Pettis down, he was trying to hurt him the whole time. He was trying to throw punches, knees, and then Pettis, he was trying to work off his back the whole time. I have to give Pettis credit. He's incredibly tough. I mean, RDA landed some serious punches, and Pettis, says that he couldn't see out of that eye very early on in the fight, which obviously hindered him. But nevertheless, he came out there, kept trying to kick RDA in the head, kept trying to work his game plan. It just wasn't his nut. RDA just wanted it more, and it's just how things turn out. But nevertheless, very impressed with RDA, very impressed with Pettis for staying in there where a lot of guys would have given up, tapped out, or, would have just thrown in the towel. He was in there to the very end, and that's very respectable. Very interested to see what Anthony Pettis does from here. But nevertheless, RDA just absolutely impressed me and capped off what to me was possibly and probably will be one of the best events of the year.
I think you could almost liken it, given how much momentum Anthony Pettis had, you could almost liken it to when TJ Dillashaw defeated Renan Barão, in their fight. I think it's crazy to have, like we said, Joanna and RDA, both underdogs, both won 2 title changes in one night. I mean, if that doesn't shake things up, what does? And the interesting thing is now, who does RDA face next? Because, and I got on our Twitter and I tweeted this, whoever he faces will be a rematch. Basically, he's got one of 3, maybe 4 choices, and either way, he's going to be having a rematch in his next title fight, because you've got Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Cowboy Cerrone. Both of these guys, people are just aching to see fight for the title. One of these guys is going to get their momentum broken. I'm thinking it's going to be Donald Cerrone. I think Khabib is going to beat him. And I think you'll be seeing Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Rafael dos Anjos. And of course, that's a rematch of their fight in which Khabib absolutely dominated. We will see if RDA's improvements are enough. If not, then you've got Cowboy Cerrone. He may be the next guy to fight him. And again, that's a fight where Rafael dos Anjos won previously via grappling. And the way he's looked, and obviously with his striking being so good, I think he would defeat Cowboy Cerrone. The other 2 possibilities, and I think these are the more unlikely ones, you might see the UFC do a rematch with Anthony Pettis, although I think that would be grossly unfair. I mean, sure, down the line, but definitely not an immediate rematch. Or you might see Benson Henderson, who, just beat Brennan Thatcher, but that I think is even less likely. So realistically, it's going to be the Khabib or Cowboy Cerrone. But if it does end up being Khabib, and if he does end up, doing the same thing that he did do to RDA in their last fight, you may see another title change. You may see RDA not even defend his title once. But, that's a bit unfair to say, considering he just came off an amazing performance and defeated a guy who, many people thought was not necessarily undefeatable, but, he was riding a lot of momentum.
Yeah, Cass, the passion in your voice when you talk about it, I think that just portrays the whole scene as it is right now. Everybody's just very, very excited to see what happens. A little bit disappointed that you left out one of our favorites there, Cass, Clay Guida, who must be sitting on the couch somewhere at home going, damn it, I beat both of these guys at one point or another.
Yeah,
I should be the
that's
champion.
A good point. Well, he's in featherweight now. Maybe Clay Guida needs to, jump on the arbies, pack on a few more pounds, and go back up to lightweight.
Yeah, I could just see him if he needs any motivation to get back in there, maybe they'll do it for him. But overall, just a great event, and it's a very interesting situation. Much like the welterweight scene, much like the strawweight scene, now the lightweight scene becomes very interesting to me. Not that it wasn't before with Pettis, and I'm also very interested to see what happens with Pettis himself. Who's he going to get matched up with? What's he going to come out like? What? Hopefully he doesn't get injured and we see him back in there sooner than later. It's all very exciting to see how how ex champions can make a comeback and how new champions are going to fare and who they're going to match up with. It's a very exciting time to be a UFC fan.
It is, and with cards like this, like UFC 185 and all these awesome cards coming up from not only the UFC, you know, you've got World Series of Fighting coming up a couple of weeks, you got ONE FC, you know, Bellator 2.0, 3.0, whatever you want to call it, is churning out really exciting cards. So it's a great time to be an MMA fan. I think compared to 2014, I think everyone is really pulling out all the stops, all organizations. You know, even here in Australia with Hex Fight Series, they put on a great, card last night. I think that's pretty much the end of the discussion for this week, for another episode for Submission Raider from you and me, Dennis. We'll be back next week, same time, same place. There'll be plenty to talk about. We'll, of course, have some big, sexy guests. Before we go, Dennis, any final words for the fans?
Yeah, Cass, while at Hex, I was able to meet a few really cool Submission Radio listeners. You know what? You and me were very lucky. We have some really cool listeners. A lot of them usually contact us through Twitter or shoot us emails. And by the way, guys, if you have an opportunity, Submission AUS, at Submission AUS, check us out. Shoot us a tweet. Give us a comment. Shoot us an email. Always love chatting to fans, but I did run into this one fan that I have to mention. Cass, his name is Jim. He came down. He was actually sitting down next to Travis Brown and some other big UFC names, but he had to come down and say hi to me, which I thought was really funny. And he basically told me, Cass, and look, I don't want to blow your mind here, but he thinks that we say absolute or absolutely too many times. So him and his friends, they came up with a little drinking game where they take a shot every time we say absolutely. So
that's
Jim,
absolutely ridiculous.
It's absolutely ridiculous, Jim. And this was absolutely a huge episode of Submission Radio. Cass, I think UFC 185 was absolutely amazing.
And I think you might have had an absolutely amazing time meeting Jim as well, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. It was absolutely one of the absolutely best times that I absolutely had, Cass. And Jim, we're going to be double checking to make sure you took those shots. So you better not back out on your word, buddy.
So enjoy your hangover, Jim, and we'll be back next week.